My name is Connie Miller. I'm currently in my early 40s, but this happened in the fall of 1999 when I was 14. My neighborhood sat on the western edge of a small Massachusetts town, not one of the famous historic ones that tourists visit, but close enough to the old colonial routes that the surrounding woods still carried some weight. It's the kind of place where kids biked everywhere, and parents only started worrying once the streetlights came on. That October afternoon was crisp. The air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and damp leaves. I had stayed late for an after-school program, and on the walk home I decided to cut through the forest instead of taking the long way around, which is the way I usually went, because I would normally walk home with my friends. But I was alone that day. The woods bordered the back of our subdivision. A girl I had never seen before stepped out from between two trees. At first, I thought she was just another kid from school. She looked to be around my age, but her dress was all wrong. It was dark, almost black wool, high-collared, long-sleeved, with a heavy skirt that brushed the ground. At the time, I thought it was strange. I didn't realize how outdated her outfit was. It was like something my grandmother would have worn to church in the 1950s. The girl's face was a bit pale, but otherwise looked normal. "Hi," she said, smiling like we had known each other forever. "My name is Ashley. You live up the road, right?" I blinked as she fell into step beside me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We must be neighbors." I had lived in that neighborhood for my entire life, and I knew everyone on my street. I had never seen this girl before, but maybe a new family had moved in, and I just didn't notice. We walked together toward the neighborhood entrance. She asked about my classes and complained about how long this walk was. We kept chatting as we turned onto our street. The sun began dipping low, casting long shadows across the lawns. Then Ashley disappeared. 1 second her shoulder was brushing mine. The next, the space beside me was empty. "Ashley?" I called out. No answer. That's when I heard it. A little girl scream. High, piercing, and full of raw pain. It came from somewhere near the tree line behind the houses, but I couldn't see anyone. It didn't sound like someone playing. It sounded like someone dying in agony. The scream rose and cut off sharply, then came again, weaker this time. Like whatever was making it was being dragged away. I ran, backpack slamming against my back, sneakers pounding the pavement, all the way back home. I didn't tell my parents the full story, just that I had heard something scary in the woods. They blamed my imagination and the approaching Halloween season. I avoided that path afterward. By winter, I had almost convinced myself that it was just a weird daydream. Years passed. I moved away for college and then work. Last summer, I was back home visiting my family when I ran into Mr. Coffee at the downtown cafe. He had been the town librarian when I was a kid. He was tall, soft-spoken, and was always recommending local history books. He was now 82 years old, and he walked with a cane. But his eyes lit up when he recognized me. I wasn't with anyone, so we sat together and caught up over some coffee. Somehow the conversation drifted to childhood memories, and I found myself telling him about that afternoon in 1999. The girl in the dark dress, how she vanished, and that awful scream. He listened to my story with a serious expression. "You grew up on Elm Court?" he asked. When I confirmed, he told me the neighborhood had been built in the early 1960s, right on top of old foundations. The entire western side of town sat on what used to be a small colonial settlement. During King Philip's War in the 1670s, native warriors swept through, burning the settlement to the ground, killing or carrying off settlers. The survivors fled, and the site lay abandoned for centuries. By the 1950s, when Mr. Coffee was a boy, the ruins were still there, charred stone cellars and crumbling chimneys. Some of those people never made it out of the fire, or the woods for that matter. Mr. Coffee then apologized for being so intense, but told me he believed that I encountered a ghost that day. My parents still live in that neighborhood. Whenever I visit, I sometimes walk down that old forest path. I haven't seen or heard anything since that day over 25 years ago, but that scream is something I'll never forget. This happened back in 2007. I was 22 years old and on vacation in Florida with a group of friends. We stayed in Zephyr Hills, a small town that doesn't have much going on, except for its municipal airport where people go skydiving. One of your recent stories took place in this town, and since you also cover paranormal encounters, I decided to type this up and share it. The others in my group were planning on skydiving, not me. No amount of money could get me to jump out of an airplane. I've always preferred camping, hiking, fishing, etc. So while I went to the drop zone, I decided to do a solo overnight camping trip in the woods. My friend Mike dropped me off late that afternoon near a bridge off of Highway 39. I rented a cheap tent, sleeping bag, and a portable skillet in town. The area I was in was part of the Upper Hillsborough Preserve, which runs along the Hillsborough River. Despite its name, that river technically begins in Pasco County, which is where I was. I told Mike I would find a spot along the river, camp for the night, and call him the next morning. He thought I was crazy for camping alone, but I thought the rest of them were crazy for jumping out of an airplane. So we wished each other luck and went our separate ways. The forest was full of pines and palmettos. The humidity near the river was brutal. I followed the trails for about 40 minutes until I found a nice clearing roughly 20 yards from the water. It felt perfect. I set up my tent, cooked some hot dogs on the portable skillet. There was a burn ban in effect, no campfires, and watched the sky turn from orange to black. By 10 o'clock, I was zipped up inside my tent. Something woke me up a little after 2 a.m. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching on leaves and twigs. It didn't sound like an animal. I laid there frozen, heart pounding. As the steps circled nearby, they would pause, then start again. Like whatever it was wandering aimlessly. I grabbed my flashlight, unzipped the tent, and called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" I swept my beam around, but saw nothing but trees and the river reflecting my light. I stayed close to my tent. Then, the footsteps began again, this time on the opposite side of the river. I saw a shape stumbling out of the trees. "Show yourself." It then came into the light. It was a man with no head. Just a body wearing jeans and a jacket, but above the shoulders there was just nothing. According to most paranormal accounts I've read over the years, headless apparitions usually move with the normalcy of a living person. This apparition did not behave in the same way. It appeared to be stumbling around like it couldn't see. I know this may seem like a strange thing to say, but it was like it actually had no head. Its movements were erratic. It jerked forward, then suddenly halted, before changing directions without warning. Its hands were blindly groping at tree branches, trying to steady itself as it staggered along. "What the fuck?" I called out, but the thing didn't stop moving. It just kept stumbling toward the river. I stood there, dumbfounded, my light fixed on the impossibility just yards away, grateful that a river was separating us. It eventually made it to the river bank, where it tripped on a rock and fell into the water. It was a little further down the river, so I ran to the spot where it fell in and shined my light into the water, but saw no signs of anything. I ran back to my tent. Words cannot describe how confused and terrified I was. I zipped it shut like it would help, killed my light, and sat there shaking for what felt like hours. I didn't hear the footsteps again, but that did nothing for the panic attack I was having. I tried to calm myself down, but I ended up calling Mike around 4 a.m., whispering into my phone like an idiot. He was half asleep when he answered, but when he heard the panic in my voice, he woke up fast. He met me back at the bridge about an hour later. I didn't tell him the full story on the drive back to the hotel, just that something had scared the shit out of me. He didn't push it. The next morning we had to go back for the camping gear. I was in such a hurry when I left that I didn't bother packing anything up. I felt much better having someone with me this time around. The tent was exactly as I had left it. The sleeping bag was still inside the tent, and the skillet was sitting on top of a log. Nothing seemed out of place. I tried to laugh off the incident for the rest of the trip. I ended up telling the guys that it was a bear, but they all figured that I was just being a chicken shit, which made no sense because I had been solo camping several times before this. On our last night in town, we were at this dive bar having drinks. I ended up talking to an off-duty cop after a game of pool. He was an older guy who had lived in the area for his whole life. After a couple of beers, I casually asked him if there had been any murders or strange deaths out in the woods by 39. He thought about it and said, "Not that I've ever heard of, but that preserve is huge, thousands of acres of forest, and lots of swamp areas that are hard to reach. If someone wanted to hide a body out there, they would have to drag it through the woods from the highway. And we always look for suspicious vehicles parked along the roads. It's unlikely, but not impossible." That night sparked my interest in the paranormal, and I've read about a lot of ghostly encounters over the years, but I've never heard of an encounter quite like mine. Most stories that involve headless spirits never mention that spirit being affected by having no head. The entity I encountered was somehow bound by its missing anatomy, moving through the forest blind and disoriented. I have thought about that night a lot over the years. I think a long time ago someone was killed out there. Perhaps they were then dragged into the woods, and their head was removed at some point. Spirits do often reenact the movements that were part of a routine, or something they did just before they died. They are often referred to as residual hauntings, or an echo. I don't think this is the case because it would be nearly impossible for this to happen, but it's a very disturbing thought to think that I witnessed an echo of an unusually long reflexive action that took place after a backwoods decapitation, where a beheaded body stood up and stumbled aimlessly through the forest before plummeting into the river. I grew up in New Orleans until my parents moved us to Austin, Texas when I was around 15. For context, my mom's side of the family has always been deep into voodoo and black magic for generations. Root work, readings, altars in the back rooms, etc. My father is a hardline Baptist, so when I was a kid, my mother would shut that world away, which caused a lot of problems. Her family was very upset that she turned her back on the family legacy over a, quote, Bible thumper. In 2017, when I was in my early 20s, we got the news that my grandmother was dying. So my mom and I flew back to New Orleans to visit her. One evening, my aunt pulled me aside in the kitchen, while my mom was in the front room. She was my mom's older sister, and the only one who still openly practiced. While we were catching up, she casually asked if I was seeing anyone. I told her the truth, a few dates here and there, but nothing serious. I was 21, in college, and was focused on my future. My aunt set her coffee down and looked me directly in the eye. "You need to find somebody before 30. Married, babies. Don't play with this. The women in this family, we don't get to walk that road alone past 30. Not without consequences." I actually laughed in her face. I told her I wasn't going to rush into marriage and kids just because some old superstitious nonsense. I was going to be a lawyer, and I was going to build my own life. She just nodded slowly, the way that people do when you're making a big mistake, but you're just too proud to hear it. My grandmother passed away that year, and my aunt passed away 2 years after, in 2019. Fast forward to now. I turned 30 in February. I'm a brand new associate at a solid law firm here in Austin. Finally starting to feel like all those long nights and student loans were worth it. I have my own house, a good circle of friends, and zero interest in settling down just to check a box. I was proud of that. Until the dream started. The first one was the night after I turned 30. I was back in my grandmother's old house. Something with too many joints was crawling across the ceiling, calling out my name in a very disturbing voice. I woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. I told myself it was just the stress, but the nightmares kept coming, each one worse than the next. Eventually things began happening when I was awake. Scratching inside the walls, whispering voices from the air vents, footsteps in the hallway. I would catch a movement out of the corner of my eye, a dark blur that vanished as soon as I turned my head. I called up my mom. When I told her what was happening, she got real quiet and told me to come back home for a visit. She wouldn't say anything else over the phone. I was busy with work assignments, and I couldn't visit her until the following weekend. After Dad had gone to bed, Mom sat me down at the kitchen table and told me the truth. Her voice was low and tired, like she had been dreading this conversation for years. "What your aunt told you, your grandmother also told to me, and I dismissed it just like you. I grew up around superstition from the old folks, but I still got married to your father at 21 and had you by 23. I just happened to fall in love at the right time. But the stories about the women in our family who waited, something always came for them. Some got sick, some lost their minds, and some just disappeared. The thing that shows up is different for each of them, but it always starts after their 30th birthday. I tried to pull us out of that life. That's part of the reason we moved to Texas. I raised you Christian, kept you away from all that, but deep down, a part of me always knew. Blood remembers." I left my mom's house still unconvinced. The last Tuesday, I was working late on a case. I got home around 11:30, kicked off my heels, and walked into the kitchen. There's a dining room mirror that hangs on the far wall that gives a clear view into the kitchen before you reach it. In the reflection was a tall, dark figure. It had its back turned to me. It had broad shoulders under what looked like an old coat, and two thick, curved horns rising from its head. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, completely still. I screamed so loud I tore my throat. I ran out of the front door with my bare feet, and when I finally gathered myself, I called up my friend Lauren and spent the night at her place. I'm back at my place now during the day. The figure hasn't appeared again, but I can still feel it, watching me. I just want to make one thing perfectly clear before I end my story. I'm not posting this to tell young women that they need to get married and have kids by age 30. I'm very proud of the life I've built. I love my independence, I love my career, and I worked my ass off for it. But my family has a history that can't be ignored. Something ancient has followed me from New Orleans, and now I'm just wondering if I'm already too late.
I moved off the grid after the divorce. New Mexico fit me because it was pretty affordable. Land was cheap, the wind carried, and sun was reliable. I wanted simple living, a roof I paid for in sweat, a bank of solar panels that hummed like lifeblood, a tank full of collected rain and hauled water. Days would slip into this nice clean routine. Charge the batteries, check the lines, mend what breaks, sit on the stoop and enjoy what's mine. I even had windows for growing crops. Now, I didn't come all the way out here to hide. I'd already raised kids, worked not one but 2 careers, and tried to be all the things that all people are. But out here, the list just gets shorter. Keep the lights on, keep the pump primed, and enjoy every second of it. The nights out here were better than sex. Oh, baby. Zero light pollution, and coyotes tune the countryside, and stars cut through everything else. I heard a quote that really inspired me. War is easy. All you have to do is survive. I didn't want war, but I wanted that kind of mindset when I got up every single morning. The highway brings unwanted traffic. An interstate curls through the hills a few miles south, and it'll drag strangers the way river will drag garbage. Most will pass by, some wave from the shoulder and keep moving. But every so often, one will stray. Call it curiosity, boredom, strung out desperation. They walk the auroros and fences like they're shopping. The harmless ones will make eye contact when they ask for water. The spun out ones will come right at you. I would keep polite boundaries, a no-nonsense tone, and a camera over my porch. The nearest neighbors sat a mile apart. I also kept a single-shot .410 in the kitchen drawer and a steadier prayer inside my chest that every day nobody would be showing up to bother me and I'd have to use it. The day my story takes place, it was really quiet. I was inside cleaning dishes when someone knocked on my front door. 3 knocks, and immediately I was on edge. Nobody knocks out here. People honk or they shout from their trucks, and that's only when they show up. I have a visitor once a month, maybe, if at all. So when that sound erupted through my house, I froze for a second. Through the window, I saw a man standing on my porch. Mid-20s maybe, neat hair, clean shaven. His shirt was buttoned up to the neck, but the fabric was stained dark at the armpits and collar. Looked decent from a distance, less so up close. He gave me this polite smile. "Afternoon, ma'am. Hope I'm not intruding." "What do you need?" I asked him simply. Just kind of curious about your solar setup," he said. "I'm thinking about putting one in myself." That line would get me all the time, people wanting to see how I did it. Most of them were pretty harmless, and some turned out to actually be solar salesmen, of course. I opened the door just a few inches and left the chain on. "You running a system already?" I asked him. "Trying to. I bought property right down the road here, off the pass. I figured I'd ask around before spending a bunch of money, you know?" He looked at me dead in the eye, but something didn't really match up. His pupils were blown wide, and there was this sour smell under his cologne, ammonia or something. "What brand inverter are you using?" I asked. He blinked. Outback." "Which model?" He smiled at me like I asked him some kind of trick question. The basic one, I'm pretty sure." That's when I knew he was lying to me. Anybody who's ever touched a solar setup can't stop talking about watts and charge times. This guy was 100% guessing at all the answers, telling me what I wanted to hear. So again, the alarm bells start going off in my head. "Look, I can't really help you," I told him. "You should probably just go talk to the hardware store in town. There's a solar company too." He leaned on the doorframe. "Just 5 minutes. I'm not selling anything, I swear. I've been walking for hours." That's when I realized just how dirty he was. "From where?" I asked. "Down by the wash?" "That's 10 miles away." He shrugged at me. "I get around." I was about to shut the door when I heard something faint from the far side of the house, a scrape like a shoe brushing stucco. I felt it more than I heard it. He caught my pause. "You okay?" he asked me. "Yeah," I said. "Are you alone?" He smiled again. "Of course I am." The sound came once more, softer this time, window glass shuffling. Someone was out back. "I think you should go," I said. He tilted his head, listening into my house. "You got somebody else here?" "That's none of your business." "Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to pry." But he didn't move. He just stood there watching my face, waiting for any kind of sign. His fingers flexing at his waist. I could see the dirt under his nails, caked all black. "Look," I said. "It's getting late, and I don't let strangers hang around after dark." He didn't back off. He only responded back with, "It's lonely, doesn't it?" "I'm fine with lonely." "I bet you hear weird and strange things out here." "Yeah, well, nothing I can't handle." That air between us tightened. He shifted his weight, getting ready to push. I felt it in my gut. "Back up," I said to him. "Come on, ma'am. I'm not gonna hurt you." "Back up." His smile faltered. "Do you really think you're safe out here?" Immediately after, he lunged forward, fast and desperate. The chain caught the door halfway, snapping tight, and I slammed it shut with everything I had. His fingers were in there when it hit, crushing under the weight of the door. That sound that came out of him didn't even sound human. It was high, wet, and furious. He yanked, but I leaned my shoulder into the door, was not letting him have his hand back. "Get off my porch!" I screamed at him. He finally pulled back, leaving streaks of blood on the wood. "Eli! Eli, come help me!" he shouted. And that name turned my stomach. There was another one. I ran through the kitchen, down the hall, and the back window, the one by my bedroom, was 2 inches open, and the screen bent inward. A man's face was hovering there, pale and pocked with sores, eyes very dilated. He was rail skinny, beard patchy, wearing a stained wife beater. He froze when he saw me, then tried to shove himself through. "Get out!" I screamed, grabbing the gun from the drawer. A short barrel 410 single shot, but it looked like a cannon up close. It was my snake gun around the property, something I usually use to get rid of the pests. I pointed it dead center at his chest. He stopped moving, his mouth open, but no sound came out. Then he smiled the most hateful smile I've ever seen. "You said you were going to be easy," he muttered. "Move away from my window or I'll put a hole in your lungs." He held up his hands, half laughing. "We were just looking around. No need to get angry." I cocked the hammer, and the sound went through the house and wiped that stupid grin off that asshole's face. He stumbled backwards, tripping over something outside, then took off towards the ridge. I ran to the front and slammed that extra deadbolt, then grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Of course, it took forever for the dispatcher to answer me.
911, what's your emergency?
"There's 2 men on my property," I said. "One tried to break in. The other, he's bleeding bad. They're still out here somewhere."
Ma'am, where are you located?
I gave her my location twice, and she told me the sheriff's was sending units from town, but it'd take at least 30 minutes to get here. And out here, 30 minutes is a lifetime. It's actually the only real danger when living out here. I heard about a neighbor out in the desert having a stroke, and he died because it took the ambulance too long to get there.
Stay inside. Keep your doors locked.
The dispatcher said. Already done. I walked my house with the gun in one hand and the phone in the other, breathing like I just run some kind of marathon. I watched the windows and checked every lock twice. The sun was now gone, the light turning red across the desert. Through the kitchen window, I saw them again, both men standing at the edge of my property. The clean one was clutching his hand, holding a rag around it. The thin one had his arm around him like they were some kind of couple of stooges. They were speaking back and forth, but too far away for me to hear what they were actually saying. Then they both turned back toward the house. The clean one raised his hand and flipped me off, and the other followed suit. They stood there for a long moment, silhouettes against the dying light, then started off west toward the Badlands. Away from town or any semblance of civilization, and seeing them walk that way haunts me still to this day, because in my heart, I can't fathom where they were going or what they could have possibly been waiting for them out there. I watched until they disappeared over the ridge. I kept the lights off and the curtains open, pacing from window to window, gun in hand. The desert looked flat and harmless, but every bush now looked like it could move. Every gust felt like and sounded like footsteps just outside. The dispatcher called twice to check in, and both times she told me the same thing: help's on the way. And both times I told her I was fine, but it still felt like the walls were closing in. I continued to sweep the house, bathroom, spare room, pantry, then checked every door a third time. The front doorknob was streaked with blood, and I didn't clean it off. I wanted proof that any of this actually happened. Outside, the wind picked up, and my floodlight on the pole buzzed and flickered, throwing short shadows across the porch. I raised my gun, aiming more at nothing but the darkness beyond my fence. Then, slowly, headlights came into view. 2 vehicles bumping down the dirt road, sirens off, dust halos around them. I set the gun on the table and met them at the door when they knocked. 3 deputies came inside with flashlights and checked my house, the sheds, and the perimeter. Found prints and some boot and some bare. 1 deputy followed a trail halfway to the Aurora, but it ended in the sand. "Well, they're gone," he said to me. "But you did the right thing. Handled that pretty damn well." I asked if they'd come back, and he looked at me and sighed. "Probably not. But keep your gun close and keep all your doors locked." They left around midnight. I locked the door behind them and listened to the silence slowly return. The next morning, I drove into town, bought a new lock for the back door, some motion lights, and a 12 gauge with a short barrel and smooth action. I bought some more cameras too, 4 of them, wireless with night vision. That weekend, I mounted every single one, so the next time I have a visitor like that, I'll see them way before they actually knock on my door. We'd been living out of the van for 3 weeks when we found the river and the bluffs. Utah goes on forever if you know where to look. We followed a rutted 2-track past a gate that didn't lock and drifted down into a basin of red rock and cottonwoods. It was truly a beautiful, secluded stretch of desert. My girlfriend and I run an off-grid vlog, nothing fancy. A couple of cameras, a drone, tripods, mics with those fuzzy covers. We film what we use, what we eat, where we sleep, all the ways it goes wrong as well. People like the mistakes more than they actually like the wins, and we earn that pretty early on. I talk to the lens, and she shoots. We edit in the dark on a folding table with nothing but our power cell batteries. Those first few days were really perfect out there. We filmed this camp kitchen segment about cheap camp tacos, floated the river with our sandals tied through our belt loops. We hiked the bluff trail, breathless once at the top, and took a thumbnail photo of us grinning like idiots at the valley wide open behind us. At night, we lay on the tailgate and watched the satellites drift. There was this unbelievable amount of them. Coyotes yipped far off, and I slept like a baby. I thought maybe we'd stay for a week, maybe 2. There was enough flat spots to move and camp every few days, enough deadfall for small fires, 0 service, so no uploading shorts, just content creation and some light editing. We met nobody. A couple of rigs passed high on the distant ridge and then would vanish soon after. Otherwise, it was pretty much all ours. On the 3rd evening, we lugged gear into the water for a golden hour shoot. The sun slid to setting and then turned the cliff's hopper on. She waded up to her knees, laughing and complaining, while I framed a long shot of the bend where the river hooked north. The light hit something across the canyon and flashed for just a second. "Did you see that?" she asked me. Probably a bottle or something," I said, squinting. I raised the camera, zoomed, and panned along the opposite bluff. Cottonwoods hid most of the rim. Then the sun broke through the gap and the glare hit again. A flat plate of shine. Not a bottle, but glass. There, half tucked beneath the trees, sat this black van. No movement, no sound, just kind of there, where nothing had been all week long. Watching the same view that we were, or maybe watching us. At first, we honestly didn't think much of it. People will come and go and camp in strange spots all the time. Maybe they'd come in from the other side, following some old mining road that we didn't see. But the van didn't move that night. No campfire, no music, no lantern glow, just a black box sitting in the dark across the canyon. That following morning, still there. "Creepy," she muttered, zooming in with the telephoto. "No plates, no windows either. That's really weird." "It has to be one of those converted rigs," I said. "Overlanders or something, you know?" But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I wasn't right. There was no chairs, no gear, no solar panels, just the van. and zero evidence of any kind of recreation being had. We spent that day shooting content, filtering water, cooking beans, setting up a tarp station, and then trying to forget it all. By sundown, we'd convinced ourselves it really was nothing, but as the canyon turned purple and the stars started to burn through the haze, the air around us seemed to change and the wind stilled. It got really, really quiet. Then came the lights. They weren't like planes or satellites. They darted, stopped, dropped, and shot upward again in these impossible bursts. Sometimes they glowed red, sometimes they glowed blue. One flickered directly above the ridge, a jagged pulse that reminded us of some kind of kaleidoscope. My girlfriend filmed until her battery died, but when we checked the footage, there's nothing, just black sky. Maybe some kind of reflection? I said. Reflection of what? She asked me. It's a canyon. There's nothing out here to reflect off. No, maybe like some kind of atmospheric thing. Our lenses don't have what it takes to pick it up. And that's when we both noticed the movement across the ravine. The van's side door was now open, figures moving in and out, 3, maybe 4. They carried tripods and something that looked like a large antenna. One of them kept sweeping the lights with what looked like binoculars. Another stood on the roof of the van with something that glowed faintly green. Their setup looked far too advanced for some kind of meteor watching, way too organized. I raised my flashlight and clicked it twice, a friendly signal. Nothing back. They didn't react. They didn't even look our way. "Hey!" I yelled across the gap, my voice echoing off the stone. The figure on the roof froze, and just for a second, they turned away, stepping down from the van. We went back inside the tent not long after, and neither of us could really sleep. The air was heavy, like right before a storm. Every time I close my eyes, I see those lights again, jerking, twitching, zigzagging across the sky like fireflies out on a wire. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a low hum. It wasn't close, but steady and mechanical. I unzipped the flap, and the van's headlights were on now, dimmed and pointed toward the sky. Those strange lights were back, more of them, scattered and moving a lot faster. My girlfriend sat up beside me, whispering, "Oh my God, they're right above us." And they were everywhere. I watched one of the men across the canyon raise up his equipment, and that hum quickly grew louder. The air felt staticky, hair rising even, and then just as suddenly everything kind of blinked out. The hum, the lights, the motion, gone. And that van went dark again. They hauled their stuff back into the van and went back to being quiet. We slept at dawn, woke late, and found it parked in the exact same spot. No visible equipment, no people, no nothing. It went on like that for 3 more nights. Every evening around 10, the sky erupted with that strange activity. Every morning, silence and emptiness. And our cameras never caught a thing. No lights, nothing but blank footage. Phones, GoPros, even the drone, all completely useless. It was as if the phenomenon wasn't happening at all, except that we were seeing it, clear as day, but only with our eyes. We started rationing the food and water early on just in case. I wanted to leave, but she said nobody's gonna believe us if we don't get some kind of proof. So we stayed. Maybe there's some kind of meteorologist, I offered, studying something rare, like ball lightning. She stared at me like I was full of shit, and maybe I was. I didn't argue. I started keeping the hatchet beside the sleeping bags, and I noticed her phone was always in her pocket now. The final night we were out there was probably the worst. The lights appeared earlier, just after sunset, flickering right above the ridge. The van's side door was wide open, silhouettes pacing in the glow of red headlamps. The hum was deeper this time, vibrating through the ground like the bass of an approaching train. I stepped out with the camera anyway. "This is night 4, I whispered, trying to keep my hand steady. The van's active again, unknown equipment, 3 subjects, maybe 4, tracking lights in the sky. Can't explain the silence out here. There's no wind, there's no animals, nothing. Behind me, my girlfriend whispered, "They're looking this way." And they were. Every single head turned toward us in this perfect unison, red lamps blinking like eyes. One of them raised something, binoculars or a scope, and a moment later, our tent lights flickered and died. The air snapped cold. The camera shut off in my hand. It was like we had been hit with some kind of EMP blast. We didn't speak again until morning, and when the sun came up, the van still hadn't moved, and there was again no sign of those people. That's when we made the decision to cross the canyon that night and see for ourselves what was going on inside that van. It took nearly 45 minutes to cross. The bluff walls were like ribs around the basin, and every sound that we made, every scrape, every breath, seemed to echo on and on. We didn't talk, we didn't really need to. All that mattered was finding out who these people were and what they were doing out here. When we finally crested the other side, the van sat about 50 yards off. Its headlights were dead, windows blacked out. Up close, it didn't look new. It was dented, rust bleeding through the paint near the door handles. There's still no sound and still no movement. We crouched behind this boulder, and my girlfriend whispered over to me, "Maybe they left?" I was about to agree, but the van's door slid open with that loud shunk. A flashlight hit us full in the face. "Stop right there," a man barked. His voice was raspy. I froze, hands instinctively going up. He stepped closer, the beam shaking in his grip. The light caught his face for just a second. Stringy mullet, missing teeth, red-rimmed eyes. Tattoos climbed up his neck like veins, faded and ugly. He held a rifle, pointed at the ground, but angled it enough that one wrong move would make it level. Hey, we're just, I started, but he cut me off. "You shouldn't be here. Turn around now." Behind him, the other figures moved, loading up equipment into the van. Tripods, long cases, coiled cables that glittered silver in the light. None of them spoke or even looked at us. "Look, we just wanted to know what you were..." He stepped to us again, jabbing the barrel in my chest. "This ain't none of your business, boy. You get back to your side before you make it fatal." My girlfriend whispered that we were leaving. The man backed up without lowering the gun. "Good, do that." He turned and shouted something to the others, words I didn't quite catch, then climbed in the driver's seat. The van roared to life, yellow cones of the headlights hitting us in the face, and for a second, the glare was completely blinding. When my vision cleared, I saw them, 3 silhouettes in the cab, all facing forward, motionless as mannequins. They reversed, spun out onto the dirt road, and drove off without a word. The hum was gone. The lights in the sky were gone too, just black emptiness above us, and the sound of the van slowly fading off into the desert. We stood there for a long time, I think too shocked to move or do anything, and when we finally made it back to camp, dawn was breaking, washing the canyon in that weak pink light. Everything felt strange, the tent, the gear, even the river now to us. We packed up in silence, loaded the truck, and left before the sun even touched the ridges. Around a week later, I went through every file, every clip. All of our footage from those nights was either black or corrupted. No lights, no van, not even our own voices. Absolutely no trace of that night exists, outside of the ones in our memories. I moved off the grid after the divorce. New Mexico fit me because it was pretty affordable. Land was cheap, the wind carried, and sun was reliable. I wanted simple living, a roof I paid for in sweat, a bank of solar panels that hummed like lifeblood, a tank full of collected rain and hauled water. Days would slip into this nice clean routine. Charge the batteries, check the lines, mend what breaks, sit on the stoop and enjoy what's mine. I even had windows for growing crops. Now, I didn't come all the way out here to hide. I'd already raised kids, worked not 1 but 2 careers, and tried to be all the things that all people are. But out here, the list just gets shorter. Keep the lights on, keep the pump primed, and enjoy every second of it. The nights out here were better than sex. Oh, baby. Zero light pollution, and coyotes tune the countryside, and stars cut through everything else. I heard a quote that really inspired me. War is easy. All you have to do is survive. I didn't want war, but I wanted that kind of mindset when I got up every single morning. The highway brings unwanted traffic. An interstate curls through the hills a few miles south, and it'll drag strangers the way river will drag garbage. Most will pass by, some wave from the shoulder and keep moving. But every so often, one will stray. Call it curiosity, boredom, strung out desperation. They walk the Auroros and fences like they're shopping. The harmless ones will make eye contact when they ask for water. The spun out ones will come right at you. I would keep polite boundaries, a no-nonsense tone, and a camera over my porch. The nearest neighbors sat a mile apart. I also kept a single-shot .410 in the kitchen drawer and a steadier prayer inside my chest that every day nobody would be showing up to bother me and I'd have to use it. The day my story takes place, it was really quiet. I was inside cleaning dishes when someone knocked on my front door. 3 knocks, and immediately I was on edge. Nobody knocks out here. People honk or they shout from their trucks, and that's only when they show up. I have a visitor once a month, maybe, if at all. So when that sound erupted through my house, I froze for a second. Through the window, I saw a man standing on my porch. Mid-20s maybe, neat hair, clean shaven. His shirt was buttoned up to the neck, but the fabric was stained dark at the armpits and collar. Looked decent from a distance, less so up close. He gave me this polite smile. "Afternoon, ma'am. Hope I'm not intruding." "What do you need?" I asked him simply. Just kind of curious about your solar setup," he said. "I'm thinking about putting one in myself." That line would get me all the time, people wanting to see how I did it. Most of them were pretty harmless, and some turned out to actually be solar salesmen, of course. I opened the door just a few inches and left the chain on. "You running a system already?" I asked him. "Trying to. I bought property right down the road here, off the pass. I figured I'd ask around before spending a bunch of money, you know?" He looked at me dead in the eye, but something didn't really match up. His pupils were blown wide, and there was this sour smell under his cologne, ammonia or something. "What brand inverter are you using?" I asked. He blinked. Outback." "Which model?" He smiled at me like I asked him some kind of trick question. The basic one, I'm pretty sure." That's when I knew he was lying to me. Anybody who's ever touched a solar setup can't stop talking about watts and charge times. This guy was 100% guessing at all the answers, telling me what I wanted to hear. So again, the alarm bells start going off in my head. "Look, I can't really help you," I told him. "You should probably just go talk to the hardware store in town. There's a solar company too." He leaned on the door frame. "Just 5 minutes. I'm not selling anything, I swear. I've been walking for hours." That's when I realized just how dirty he was. "From where?" I asked. "Down by the wash?" "That's 10 miles away." He shrugged at me. "I get around." I was about to shut the door when I heard something faint from the far side of the house, a scrape like a shoe brushing stucco. I felt it more than I heard it. He caught my pause. "You okay?" he asked me. "Yeah," I said. "Are you alone?" He smiled again. "Of course I am." The sound came once more, softer this time, window glass shuffling. Someone was out back. "I think you should go," I said. He tilted his head, listening into my house. "You got somebody else here?" "That's none of your business." "Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to pry." But he didn't move. He just stood there watching my face, waiting for any kind of sign. His fingers flexing at his waist. I could see the dirt under his nails, caked all black. "Look," I said. "It's getting late, and I don't let strangers hang around after dark." He didn't back off. He only responded back with, "It's lonely, doesn't it?" "I'm fine with lonely." "I bet you hear weird and strange things out here." "Yeah, well, nothing I can't handle." That air between us tightened. He shifted his weight, getting ready to push. I felt it in my gut. "Back up," I said to him. "Come on, ma'am. I'm not gonna hurt you." "Back up." His smile faltered. "Do you really think you're safe out here?" Immediately after, he lunged forward, fast and desperate. The chain caught the door halfway, snapping tight, and I slammed it shut with everything I had. His fingers were in there when it hit, crushing under the weight of the door. That sound that came out of him didn't even sound human. It was high, wet, and furious. He yanked, but I leaned my shoulder into the door, was not letting him have his hand back. "Get off my porch!" I screamed at him. He finally pulled back, leaving streaks of blood on the wood. "Eli! Eli, come help me!" he shouted. And that name turned my stomach. There was another one. I ran through the kitchen, down the hall, and the back window, the one by my bedroom, was 2 inches open, and the screen bent inward. A man's face was hovering there, pale and pocked with sores, eyes very dilated. He was rail skinny, beard patchy, wearing a stained wife beater. He froze when he saw me, then tried to shove himself through. "Get out!" I screamed, grabbing the gun from the drawer. A short barrel 410 single shot, but it looked like a cannon up close. It was my snake gun around the property, something I usually use to get rid of the pests. I pointed it dead center at his chest. He stopped moving. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then he smiled the most hateful smile I've ever seen. "You said you were going to be easy," he muttered. "Move away from my window or I'll put a hole in your lungs." He held up his hands, half laughing. "We were just looking around. No need to get angry." I cocked the hammer, and the sound went through the house and wiped that stupid grin off that asshole's face. He stumbled backwards, tripping over something outside, then took off towards the ridge. I ran to the front and slammed that extra deadbolt, then grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Of course, it took forever for the dispatcher to answer me.
911, what's your emergency?
"There's 2 men on my property," I said. "One tried to break in. The other, he's bleeding bad. They're still out here somewhere."
Ma'am, where are you located?
I gave her my location twice, and she told me the sheriff's was sending units from town, but it'd take at least 30 minutes to get here. And out here, 30 minutes is a lifetime. It's actually the only real danger when living out here. I heard about a neighbor out in the desert having a stroke, and he died because it took the ambulance too long to get there.
Stay inside. Keep your doors locked.
The dispatcher said. Already done. I walked my house with the gun in one hand and the phone in the other, breathing like I just run some kind of marathon. I watched the windows and checked every lock twice. The sun was now gone, the light turning red across the desert. Through the kitchen window, I saw them again, both men standing at the edge of my property. The clean one was clutching his hand, holding a rag around it. The thin one had his arm around him like they were some kind of couple of stooges. They were speaking back and forth, but too far away for me to hear what they were actually saying. Then they both turned back toward the house. The clean one raised his hand and flipped me off, and the other followed suit. They stood there for a long moment, silhouettes against the dying light, then started off west, toward the Badlands. Away from town or any semblance of civilization, and seeing them walk that way haunts me still to this day, because in my heart, I can't fathom where they were going or what they could have possibly been waiting for them out there. I watched until they disappeared over the ridge. I kept the lights off and the curtains open, pacing from window to window, gun in hand. The desert looked flat and harmless, but every bush now looked like it could move. Every gust felt like and sounded like footsteps just outside. The dispatcher called twice to check in, and both times she told me the same thing: help's on the way. And both times I told her I was fine, but it still felt like the walls were closing in. I continued to sweep the house, bathroom, spare room, pantry, then checked every door a third time. The front doorknob was streaked with blood, and I didn't clean it off. I wanted proof that any of this actually happened. Outside, the wind picked up, and my floodlight on the pole buzzed and flickered, throwing short shadows across the porch. I raised my gun, aiming more at nothing but the darkness beyond my fence. Then, slowly, headlights came into view. 2 vehicles bumping down the dirt road, sirens off, dust halos around them. I set the gun on the table and met them at the door when they knocked. 3 deputies came inside with flashlights and checked my house, the sheds, and the perimeter. Found prints and some boot and some bare. One deputy followed a trail halfway to the Aurora, but it ended in the sand. "Well, they're gone," he said to me. "But you did the right thing, handled that pretty damn well." I asked if they'd come back, and he looked at me inside. "Probably not, but keep your gun close and keep all your doors locked." They left around midnight. I locked the door behind them and listened to the silence slowly return. The next morning, I drove into town, bought a new lock for the back door, some motion lights, and a 12 gauge with a short barrel and smooth action. I bought some more cameras too, 4 of them, wireless with night vision. That weekend, I mounted every single one, so the next time I have a visitor like that, I'll see them way before they actually knock on my door. We'd been living out of the van for 3 weeks when we found the river and the bluffs. Utah goes on forever if you know where to look. We followed a rutted 2-track past a gate that didn't lock and drifted down into a basin of red rock and cottonwoods. It was truly a beautiful, secluded stretch of desert. My girlfriend and I run an off-grid vlog, nothing fancy. A couple of cameras, a drone, tripods, mics with those fuzzy covers. We film what we use, what we eat, where we sleep, all the ways it goes wrong as well. People like the mistakes more than they actually like the wins, and we earn that pretty early on. I talk to the lens, and she shoots. We edit in the dark on a folding table with nothing but our power cell batteries. Those first few days were really perfect out there. We filmed this camp kitchen segment about cheap camp tacos, floated the river with our sandals tied through our belt loops. We hiked the bluff trail, breathless once at the top, and took a thumbnail photo of us grinning like idiots at the valley wide open behind us. At night, we lay on the tailgate and watched the satellites drift. There was this unbelievable amount of them. Coyotes yipped far off, and I slept like a baby. I thought maybe we'd stay for a week, maybe 2. There was enough flat spots to move and camp every few days, enough deadfall for small fires, 0 service, so no uploading shorts, just content creation and some light editing. We met nobody. A couple of rigs passed high on the distant ridge and then would vanish soon after. Otherwise, it was pretty much all ours. On the 3rd evening, we lugged gear into the water for a golden hour shoot. The sun slid to setting and then turned the cliff's hot bronze. She waded up to her knees, laughing and complaining, while I framed a long shot of the bend where the river hooked north. The light hit something across the canyon and flashed for just a second. "Did you see that?" she asked me. Probably a bottle or something," I said, squinting. I raised the camera, zoomed, and panned along the opposite bluff. Cottonwoods hid most of the rim. Then the sun broke through the gap and the glare hit again. A flat plate of shine. Not a bottle, but glass. There, half tucked beneath the trees, sat this black van. No movement, no sound, just kind of there, where nothing had been all week long. Watching the same view that we were, or maybe watching us. At first, we honestly didn't think much of it. People will come and go and camp in strange spots all the time. Maybe they'd come in from the other side, following some old mining road that we didn't see. But the van didn't move that night. No campfire, no music, no lantern glow, just a black box sitting in the dark across the canyon. That following morning, still there. "Creepy," she muttered, zooming in with the telephoto. "No plates, no windows either. That's really weird." "It has to be one of those converted rigs," I said. "Overlanders or something, you know?" But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I wasn't right. There was no chairs, no gear, no solar panels, just the van, and 0 evidence of any kind of recreation being had. We spent that day shooting content, filtering water, cooking beans, setting up a tarp station, and then trying to forget it all. By sundown, we'd convinced ourselves it really was nothing. But as the canyon turned purple and the stars started to burn through the haze, the air around us seemed to change and the wind stilled. It got really, really quiet. Then came the lights. They weren't like planes or satellites. They darted, stopped, dropped, and shot upward again in these impossible bursts. Sometimes they glowed red, sometimes they glowed blue. One flickered directly above the ridge, a jagged pulse that reminded us of some kind of kaleidoscope. My girlfriend filmed until her battery died, but when we checked the footage, there was nothing, just black sky. "Maybe some kind of reflection?" I said. "Reflection of what?" she asked me. "It's a canyon. There's nothing out here to reflect off." "No, maybe like some kind of atmospheric thing. Our lenses don't have what it takes to pick it up." And that's when we both noticed the movement across the ravine. The van's side door was now open, figures moving in and out, 3, maybe 4. They carried tripods and something that looked like a large antenna. One of them kept sweeping the lights with what looked like binoculars. Another stood on the roof of the van with something that glowed faintly green. Their setup looked far too advanced for some kind of meteor watching. Way too organized. I raised my flashlight and clicked it twice, a friendly signal. Nothing back. They didn't react. They didn't even look our way.
Hey!
I yelled across the gap, my voice echoing off the stone. The figure on the roof froze, and just for a second, they turned away, stepping down from the van. We went back inside the tent not long after, and neither of us could really sleep. The air was heavy, like right before a storm. Every time I close my eyes, I see those lights again, jerking, twitching, zigzagging across the sky like fireflies out on a wire. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a low hum. It wasn't close, but steady and mechanical. I unzipped the flap, and the van's headlights were on now, dimmed and pointed toward the sky. Those strange lights were back, more of them, scattered and moving a lot faster. My girlfriend sat up beside me, whispering, "Oh my God, they're right above us." And they were everywhere. I watched one of the men across the canyon raise up his equipment, and that hum quickly grew louder. The air felt staticky, hair rising even, and then just as suddenly everything kind of blinked out. The hum, the lights, the motion, gone. And that van went dark again. They hauled their stuff back into the van and went back to being quiet. We slept at dawn, woke late, and found it parked in the exact same spot. No visible equipment, no people, no nothing. It went on like that for 3 more nights. Every evening around 10, the sky erupted with that strange activity. Every morning, silence and emptiness. And our cameras never caught a thing. No lights, nothing but blank footage. Phones, GoPros, even the drone, all completely useless. It was as if the phenomenon wasn't happening at all, except that we were seeing it, clear as day, but only with our eyes. We started rationing the food and water early on just in case. I wanted to leave, but she said nobody's gonna believe us if we don't get some kind of proof. So we stayed. Maybe there's some kind of meteorologist, I offered, studying something rare, like ball lightning. She stared at me like I was full of shit, and maybe I was. I didn't argue. I started keeping the hatchet beside the sleeping bags, and I noticed her phone was always in her pocket now. The final night we were out there was probably the worst. The lights appeared earlier, just after sunset, flickering right above the ridge. The van's side door was wide open, silhouettes pacing in the glow of red headlamps. The hum was deeper this time, vibrating through the ground like the bass of an approaching train. I stepped out with the camera anyway. "This is night 4, I whispered, trying to keep my hand steady. "The van's active again, unknown equipment, 3 subjects, maybe 4, tracking lights in the sky. Can't explain the silence out here. There's no wind, there's no animals, nothing." Behind me, my girlfriend whispered, "You're looking this way." And they were. Every single head turned toward us in this perfect unison, red lamps blinking like eyes. One of them raised something, binoculars or a scope, and a moment later, our tent lights flickered and died. The air snapped cold. The camera shut off in my hand. It was like we had been hit with some kind of EMP blast. We didn't speak again until morning, and when the sun came up, the van still hadn't moved, and there was again no sign of those people. That's when we made the decision to cross the canyon that night and see for ourselves what was going on inside that van. It took nearly 45 minutes to cross. The bluff walls were like ribs around the basin, and every sound that we made, every scrape, every breath, seemed to echo on and on. We didn't talk, we didn't really need to. All that mattered was finding out who these people were and what they were doing out here. When we finally crested the other side, the van sat about 50 yards off. Its headlights were dead, windows blacked out. Up close, it didn't look new. It was dented, rust bleeding through the paint near the door handles. There's still no sound and still no movement. We crouched behind this boulder, and my girlfriend whispered over to me, "Maybe they left?" I was about to agree, but the van's door slid open with that loud shunk. A flashlight hit us full in the face. "Stop right there," a man barked. His voice was raspy. I froze, hands instinctively going up. He stepped closer, the beam shaking in his grip. The light caught his face for just a second. Stringy mullet, missing teeth, red-rimmed eyes. Tattoos climbed up his neck like veins, faded and ugly. He held a rifle, pointed at the ground, but angled it enough that one wrong move would make it level. Hey, we're just, I started, but he cut me off. "You shouldn't be here. Turn around now." Behind him, the other figures moved, loading up equipment into the van. Tripods, long cases, coiled cables that glittered silver in the light. None of them spoke or even looked at us. "Look, we just wanted to know what you were..." He stepped to us again, jabbing the barrel in my chest. "This ain't none of your business, boy. You get back to your side before you make it fatal." My girlfriend whispered that we were leaving. The man backed up without lowering the gun. "Good, do that." He turned and shouted something to the others, words I didn't quite catch, then climbed in the driver's seat. The van roared to life, yellow cones of the headlights hitting us in the face, and for a second, the glare was completely blinding. When my vision cleared, I saw them, 3 silhouettes in the cab, all facing forward, motionless as mannequins. They reversed, spun out onto the dirt road, and drove off without a word. The hum was gone. The lights in the sky were gone too, just black emptiness above us, and the sound of the van slowly fading off into the desert. We stood there for a long time, I think too shocked to move or do anything. And when we finally made it back to camp, dawn was breaking, washing the canyon in that weak pink light. Everything felt strange, the tent, the gear, even the river now to us. We packed up in silence, loaded the truck, and left before the sun even touched the ridges. Around a week later, I went through every file, every clip. All of our footage from those nights was either black or corrupted. No lights, no van, not even our own voices. Absolutely no trace of that night exists, outside of the ones in our memories. By the time I got to college, most people had already found their people. College can be a social battleground if you don't have the right personality for it. You know the type. Kids who'd known each other since kindergarten, now magically all enrolled in that same big city university, clumping up on the quad like they were still on high school lunch break. I watched them from the edges. I was the transfer kid, 2 hours and a lifetime away from the town that I actually grew up in, dropped into a place where nobody knew my name unless it was on some kind of roster. It wasn't that bad. At least we were all adults now. It's not like I was looking over my shoulder or anything. In real life, I was just quiet, not shy exactly, just kind of late to everything. Late to the parties, late to the study groups, late to know about the inside jokes. I'd walk through this maze of a brick building and these manicured lawns and just feel completely out of place. Everybody else seemed to already know their roles, and I was trying to find my seat. I didn't even know what I wanted to major in yet. Online though, I actually existed. I had my Game tag, my Discord servers, my little islands of people who laughed at the same memes and stayed up way too late talking about nothing. I'd finish my night classes and go back to my shoebox dorm, then slide back into that glowing rectangle world where nobody cared that I sat alone inside the dining hall. It started off fairly simple, a couple of group chats, friends and friends of friends on Instagram, a few late night DMs that didn't feel like too big of a deal. Then somewhere at the end of my first semester, that stupid thought hit me. If I can make friends this way, then why not something more? Everybody else was meeting people, hookups, storm romances, drama. I heard it all through the paper-thin walls and half-closed doors. I was tired of listening in from the outside, so one night, lying in bed with my laptop warm up against my stomach, I downloaded that first real dating app and told myself it's not that big of a deal, just another place to exist and possibly actually be seen for once. The first week on the app was actually embarrassing. I matched with a few girls, but every connection collapsed after 5 messages, if not less. One-word replies, polite goodbyes, or just sudden silence. I kept pretending not to care, but the truth was obvious. I didn't know how to talk to people, and I couldn't keep anybody's interest. And then, that's when Sabrina appeared. Her profile felt real. No heavily filtered selfies, no fake-looking glamour shots, just a girl with dark hair and a bright smile. And photos that showed actual personality. A gaming chair, controller, friends at an arcade bar. Her bio listed the same games that I actually played, watched the same shows. It felt like somebody had reached into my head and built my perfect match. I swiped right, with an instant match. I got a message almost immediately that said, "Hey," with a smiley face. I stared at that message with my heart thudding. Most of these girls never message first. She did. Yowza. And then on, she was everywhere. Quick replies, constant energy, little jokes, random questions about my classes and my dorm situation. She sent short voice clips sometimes to me, soft and cheerful, comments that did not sound rehearsed. If she was fake, she was damn good at it. We talked every single night. I lie in bed with the phone 6 inches from my face, smiling like a complete idiot at everything she typed to me. Even thinking about it now, it was in fact pure bliss. By the end of the week, she was all I thought about. Then came the line that turned my brain into static. "We should hang out," smiley face. I reread it over and over before typing out yes. "How about tomorrow, 7 p.m., the fountain on North Campus? It's quiet there." I would have met her behind a dumpster if she asked me to, but the fountain sounded perfect. So the next day kind of dragged ass. I kept checking my phone between classes to make sure the messages were actually still there. After dinner, showered, shaved, put on a clean shirt, even used cologne for the first time in God knows how long. My roommate asked if I was going to a wedding. At 6:45, I walked up that brick path toward the park and sent her a message. Here early. She responded back saying, running a little late, almost there. That's when I noticed the small detail that should have bothered me earlier. I didn't have her number. Everything that we'd said and talked about stayed within the app. Okay, maybe it didn't matter. I'll get it tonight, right? But my battery dropped from 10% to 5% in a blink of an eye. Great. How did I forget to charge my only way to contact this girl? I texted her quickly. My phone's dying, but I'm here. Almost there, came the response. Then my screen went black. I stood there with a dead phone in my hand, feeling like a complete idiot. People met up before smartphones existed. She knew the place, she knew the time, so I shoved my phone into my pocket and sat on the fountain bench. The water glowed blue underneath the lights, turning the closest cobblestone slick and shiny. Students passed through in 2s and 3s. A couple laughed on their way to the dorms. Every time somebody approached, I straightened up, thinking it was her. 7 came and went. Thankfully, I still had my watch to keep us both honest. I kept waiting. 7:10, nothing. 7:15, I started having thoughts. Trying not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she'd gotten stuck somewhere. Maybe she was dealing with roommate drama. Maybe she was, I didn't know. Anything but standing me up. By 7:20, I couldn't sit any longer. I stood, walked a few steps, came back, sat, stood up, and repeat. That bench now felt like a stage, like I was waiting for somebody that might be actually watching me. And that thought creeped me out. I then drifted behind a line of bushes into a small grassy area. From there, I could still see the fountain, but I didn't feel as exposed. It was pretty dark back there, and with my dark clothes and no phone, I kind of blended right in. That's when another guy walked down the path. Not Sabrina, a guy. He checked his phone, glanced around, then sat by the fountain, and a chill went through my stomach. 2 minutes later, another guy approaches from the opposite direction. Same sequence. Looking around, checks his phone, and sits down. Then a third, then a fourth. There were a lot of benches in this little area, and all of them were harboring solo dudes looking at their phones. By 7:30, 5 or 6 guys sat scattered across the fountain, all around my age, all giving off that same nervous, expectant energy that I've been drowning myself in 20 minutes earlier. I stared at them from the shadows and froze. They weren't random students, they were waiting, all waiting for the same girl, Sabrina. The thought didn't crash into me, it crawled into my head and then into my heart. I hadn't been stood up, I'd been baited. And I wasn't the only one. I watched the guys at the fountain for a moment longer before stepping out from behind the bushes. Hey, I said aloud, is anybody here to meet somebody named Sabrina? All 5 turned to me. One held up his phone. Talking about her? Of course, it was the same photos, same messages, same profile. Yeah, I said. I've been here since before 7. A few of them exchanged quiet, frustrated looks, but one guy, a thick-built dude with a shaved head, walked straight up to me, already pissed. You're the one who did this? He said to me. What? No, I matched with her a week ago. Bullshit. He jabbed a finger at me. You set all this up. You were hiding in the bushes like a fucking weirdo. Before I could say anything else to respond, he shoved me, then he swung. His fist cracked up against my cheek and dropped me to the ground. My vision blurred, somebody shouted, and he hit me again. 2 guys grabbed him before he could swing once more. Knock it off, one of them yelled. He's not the catfish, dude, stop. Shaved Head kept yelling anyway, trying to break free, but the others held him back. I stayed down for a few seconds, steadying my breathing, seeing if he broke my jaw. Then one of the quieter guys pointed toward the path. Who's that? We all looked over. A 6th guy stood several yards away, partially in the shadows, hood up, phone raised, recording us. He hadn't stepped in, he hadn't reacted, he was just filming. One of them called out and asked why he was recording us. The hooded guy lowered his phone slightly, enough for us to see his face. He wasn't confused or startled. He looked absolutely entertained. What a bunch of losers, he said. Pussy-ass virgins. Then he turned around and sprinted down the walkway. One of the guys chased after him for a few steps, but stopped once he cut around a corner and disappeared off into the dark. He moved like he had already planned out his escape. Nobody spoke right away. I guess we didn't really need to. We all understood everything that was happening at the same time. Sabrina wasn't real. One by one, the guys drifted off, some annoyed, some embarrassed, all of them making that silent walk of shame. Shaved head stomped away last, still convinced that I had something to do with it. I walked home holding my jaw. My phone powered up when I got back on a charger in my dorm, and I opened up the app immediately. Of course, Sabrina's profile was now gone. Completely too. No photos, no chat history, no account. It was like that entire conversation had been wiped clean the moment he got what he wanted. I sat on my bed staring at the screen, replaying how he looked at us, calm, amused, almost proud of his work. He'd been standing there with us the whole time, hiding in plain sight, waiting to see how we'd react, and the truth was revealed. Sometimes I think back about the way he said that word to us, that we were losers, like we weren't people, just material, like we were a project that he was working on. We didn't contact each other after that, just kind of walked away and cut our losses. We knew we took an L, so I guess why salt the wound even more? It was 2006, back when my entire world fit inside a very bulky Dell desktop in the corner of our living room. I spent most nights on MySpace because it was easier than trying to make friends at school. My parents had split that year. We'd moved across town. And I spent a lot of lunch periods texting on a flip phone just to feel like I had some semblance of a life. Emo boys were the thing at the time. Straightened hair, tight shirts, moody lyrics inside their statuses. And half the girls in my class were obsessed with boys online. I guess I wasn't really any different though. I met him in a MySpace chat room one night. Danny XXRarXX. Yeah. His profile picture was a skinny kid with long black bangs, pale skin, and a lip ring. Bathroom mirror pic. You know the type. Band poster taped crooked behind him. Exactly the kind of guy that everybody at school was daydreaming about. He actually messaged me first. "You seem chill. You from around here?" I remember how fast my fingers moved, how relieved I felt when anybody wanted to actually talk to me. And within the hour, I knew his favorite bands, his favorite soda, the name of the girl who broke his heart. He said he was 15, went to a high school a few miles away. And the wild part was that when a couple of girls at my school claimed they'd seen him around at games or something, or hanging out near parking lots. A real local kid, somebody my age, somebody into me. Pretty soon, I'm logging in just for him, and it became the only part of my day that I actually looked forward to. Every message felt like proof that maybe I was not, in fact, invisible. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought I was. And for about a month, Danny and I were basically glued to each other online. Before school, after school, late at night, constant messaging. He always said the right things. He told me I was different, that he felt like he could talk to me about anything and everything. And at 13, with that kind of attention, it hit hard and I did not want it to stop. So naturally, I wanted to meet him. At first, I asked and he said yes without any hesitation. Totally, let's hang out. And then canceled the morning of. The next attempt, he got grounded. Another time, his phone broke. It became this pattern. Agree, cancel, and every time he apologized, I believed it. I was too invested to consider anything else. By week 5, I was done waiting. I pushed harder, telling him I didn't care if he didn't look exactly like his photos. I just wanted to see him in person. Okay, let's meet behind Dario's Pizza, 5 p.m. It wasn't a great spot, but it was close enough for me to walk to. Told my mom that I was heading to a friend's place, grabbed my small purse and headed out the door. My stomach was in knots that entire walk, equal parts excitement and dread as well. I kept looking at every passing car, half expecting somebody to roll a window down and call my name. I reached the alley a few minutes early. It looked very dismal, tight, dark, sour smelling from the dumpsters. I stood under the security light and texted him, "I'm here." No response. So I waited 5 minutes, then 10, and I called his phone, and it went straight to voicemail. I paced back and forth, checking both ends of the alley, telling myself he was probably sneaking out or stalling for some kind of dramatic entrance. And then I heard a vibration. Not my phone, but another one. The buzzing came from around the corner where the alley hooked behind the next building. I frowned and took out my phone and called his number again. The buzzing repeated, same rhythm, same timing, and a cold rush then hit my chest. I followed the sound slowly at first, then faster as the certainty grew in my stomach. I turned the corner and froze. A boy stood there, slouched up against a brick wall. Not Danny, not even close. He was pudgy, maybe a year or two older than me, with long greasy hair that covered half his face. He wore these faded black jeans and a hoodie that was riddled with safety pins. He held a phone in his hand. The screen lit up with an incoming call. Aubrey, my calls. He looked at me like he'd been caught doing something. "Hey," he said. His voice was low, really shy. "It's me, Danny." I shook my head. No, you're not him." Pushed his hair behind his ear like that might help the situation. I didn't get ready today, okay? I know I look different." "You're not the same person at all," I said. "That's not you." He took a small step toward me. "It is me, I swear. I used to be thinner." I backed away, straight into somebody standing behind me. I gasped and spun around, but the second boy was already on top of me. Same clothes, same build, same filthy hair, older though, taller. He grabbed my waist and pulled me into him. "Oh," he said, laughing softly. "She's tiny." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. The first boy moved in front of me, blocking the view of the alley. They didn't look threatening in the movie villain sense, but they looked like kids who spent too much time online. But the way they crowded me left me no doubt. They knew exactly what they were doing. I felt them squeeze my chest and then my hips. "Relax," the first one said. "You said you wanted to hang out." "No," I said louder. "Let me go." "You talk big." The second boy breathed in my hair. "Don't pretend you didn't." I shoved the first one, but he grabbed my wrist. His hand was sweaty, shaky, like he was nervous and excited at the same time. "Don't freak out," he said. "We're being cool. We just want to move." I snapped and tried to wriggle free. He didn't. The second boy pressed closer, his hands moving up my sides. "Please stop," I said. My voice cracked. "That's not fair," the first boy said. "You said stuff. You can't just..." And that was it. Something in my brain flipped from scared to just done. I jerked my arm backward, ripping it from his hand, and slammed my shoulder into his chest. He stumbled, lost his balance, and the second boy lunged out to grab me, but only snagged my hoodie by the sleeve. The seam tore as I twisted, forcing myself out into the open stretch of that alley. They shouted behind me, overlapping each other, yelling at me to wait. "Come back, you promised." I didn't look back. I ran full sprint down the alley, toward the yellow glow of the pizza place's sign, towards people, noise, anything but them. I heard their footsteps pounding after me, heavy and uncoordinated, but determined. They weren't giving up. "Please," one of them yelled. "Just talk to us." "Nobody's mad," the other one shouted. I ran even faster. I could feel them losing ground, wheezing, stumbling, but still chasing me, still calling out my name. Then my online user handle. I burst out of the alley into the crowded front of Dario's. The smell of pizza and fryer oil hit me immediately, making me sick, but I didn't slow down. I shoved through the door, almost tripping as I reached the counter. A couple eating near the window stared at me like I was causing a scene, but I didn't care. I pulled out my flip phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. When dispatch picked up, my words came out all at once. "There's two guys, they grabbed me, they tried to corner me, they're still out there." Dispatch asked where I was, and I told her. She told me to stay inside, that officers were on the way. Her voice was calm and steady, and for the first time since stepping into that alley, I felt like I was actually safe. I kept glancing at the windows, kept expecting to see one of the boys pressed up against the glass, scanning the restaurant for me. That thought made my chest tighten like I was having an asthma attack. I backed myself into a booth but stayed standing, ready to bolt at any moment. A worker asked if I needed water, and I nodded at him without speaking. It felt like forever, but I think 10 minutes later the cops finally show up. Two officers come inside to talk to me, while another went around the back. I gave them everything I had, what the boys looked like, what they said, where I'd been standing when they grabbed me. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, no matter how hard I tried to steady them. A radio crackled on one of the officers' shoulder, and a voice said,
"We've got them. Far into the alley, both matching the description, trying to avoid us."
I don't know what that felt like in the moment. Relief, I guess, but also this strange numbness, like my brain had flipped a switch to tone down my anxiety. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges, and I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said, "absolutely." They took my mom's number next, and that was the part I dreaded the most. What she'd say when she found out I'd been sneaking around to meet boys from the internet. But when she arrived, she didn't yell, just wrapped her arms around me and asked if I was okay, if I was hurt. The officers brought me back out so I could identify the boys. I stayed behind the patrol car door, but I could see them clearly, both red-faced, sweating and out of breath. The greasy hair, the safety pin hoodie, the older one rubbing his hands together nervously. They wouldn't look at me, but kept glancing at each other, confused and irritated, like they couldn't understand why I reacted the way I did. Seeing them like that, pathetic and cornered, should have made me feel better, but it didn't. This really all happened to me. The police walked them to the cruiser, hands cupped behind their backs, one mumbling something under his breath, maybe an apology or some kind of excuse. I didn't care. I kept my eyes on the pavement. After that night, I deleted my MySpace, deleted AIM, stopped signing into any kind of chat rooms, ever. I didn't trust screens anymore, not when I knew firsthand how easily somebody could slide through them, pretending to be who they thought you wanted them to be. It's strange thinking back on it now. I was 13, I thought I was talking to my dream boy, but I was really talking to a stranger with greasy hair and a stolen photo, waiting for the right moment to lure me into a dark place. People always say the internet was simpler back then, but it wasn't. Not for me.
This happened in March of this year. My friends and I decided to go to this abandoned campsite located in the eastern Oklahoma countryside. I had been there the year before. The property was supposedly haunted. This is not a paranormal story. I'm just telling you the reason that we wanted to check it out. There were 5 of us all together: Tyler, Jordan, Abigail, Angela, and myself. We decided to enhance the experience by bringing alcohol and weed. We had 2 bottles of Henry and 9 pre-rolled joints. We arrived around 11:30, so it was dark by then. We brought along flashlights and gloves, so we were ready to go exploring. But about 15 minutes in, Angela and Abigail both wanted to go back because they were complaining about it being boring. But the rest of us had put too much into planning this trip, so we had to convince them to keep going. This required opening up one of the bottles of Henry. I personally don't like the taste of alcohol, but I decided that I would be doing some drinking that night. I also fired up a joint. One thing about me, though, is that when I'm drunk and high at the same time, I tend to get very paranoid. It obviously didn't help that we were 2 miles deep into the woods. Yeah, I wasn't making the best choices that night. After a while, the paranoia began to kick in. I started hearing footsteps disturbing the leaves behind us. I was convinced enough to yell out, "Hey, is anyone there?" Again, this probably wasn't the best idea, because it freaked out Abigail and Angela. Tyler even asked me, "Dude, what are you going on about?" "Look, I know I'm kind of fucked up right now, but I'm hearing someone following us." "It's probably just an animal, dumbass. How stoned are you?" We kept going, but I continued to hear what I thought were footsteps behind us. The thought of it being an animal didn't make me feel any better. I've never seen a black bear in the wild, but I was pretty sure they were native to this area of Oklahoma. We got to the campsite soon after. We sat at a wooden table to rest after walking 5 miles in the dark. It was around 2:50 a.m. at this point, and we decided to start partying. Let's stop here for a moment and take stock of the situation. A bunch of young adults smoking and drinking in the dead of night on a deserted campground in the middle of the vast Oklahoma forest. There were several rumors as to why this place had shut down. Some say that one of the camp counselors lost his mind and murdered several children with a fire axe. Of course, there is no evidence that this actually ever happened. My guess is this place shut down because of financial reasons. It was now just a collection of abandoned cabins and a rec hall with a caved-in roof. We were definitely being loud as hell. When I drink, the alcohol runs right through me, so I have to relieve myself multiple times. I told the gang that I had to piss and went to go find a tree. I decided to walk further away from the group until they were out of sight. I wanted to avoid any pranks they would pull on me while I was doing my business. When I was midstream, I heard a twig snap about 15 feet behind me. I didn't think it was one of my friends, since the noise was in the opposite direction they were in. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and nearly shat my pants at what I saw. Standing about 15 feet away, I saw 4 hooded figures among the trees. I zipped up my damn pants before my stream was even finished and started running back toward the group. "Guys, we need to leave here now. We aren't alone out here." They must have thought I was pranking them until they saw that I was running. They all got up and started sprinting. I heard more footsteps behind us and all around us. I genuinely thought that I was about to die. We were so deep in the woods that no one would hear us scream if we were slaughtered. None of us were thinking straight because of the recreational influence. Angela fell, and I guess no one else noticed except for me. I quickly turned to help her. Once I got her back on her feet, we couldn't tell where the rest of the group went. The moonlight was barely helping, and I didn't want to turn on my flashlight and give away our position. Angela was a mess at this point, crying and freaking out, so I had to try to calm her down and keep moving, even though I felt like I was having a panic attack myself. We kept going until we saw what looked like an old shed. I devised a plan to use the shed as cover while I called the others on my phone. Once we made our way inside, we stopped hearing the footsteps, so I thought we had lost them. The shed was actually a cabin with 3 rooms and a hallway. Once we got to the entrance, we were bombarded by a putrid smell. It damn near made me throw up all the Henry I had earlier. Angela, however, couldn't hold back and vomited right away. I tried calling Tyler and Jordan, but it just went straight to voicemail. I didn't have Abigail's number, and Angela couldn't help since her phone was dead. The smell was becoming unbearable, and I had a feeling I knew what it was. I left the entrance and made my way further inside. There was nothing of interest in the first 2 rooms, but the third I arrived at was where the stench was coming from. My heart was in my throat as I opened the door. I shined my light inside and was met with the most disturbing thing I think I've ever seen in my life. I know that a lot of you aren't going to believe me, but I'm going to tell you what I saw. At first, I was stunned when I saw a face on the floor staring up at me. It was only when I panned to my light that I realized that the head wasn't connected to anything. Leaning up against the wall were 2 torsos. There is something else that was there that I just can't bring myself to tell you. I like to think that I just imagined it, but I know it was there. I had to stay sharp if we were going to escape. I looked at the maps on my phone and saw that we were still 2 miles away from any roads. Angela was still bawling her eyes out, crying about how she didn't want to die. Honestly, I thought it was likely that we would end up dying that night. We heard the footsteps racing toward the cabin outside. I grabbed Angela and told her, "If you don't want to die, we have to run, and don't look back." I planned on running in the opposite direction of the road, while Angela made for the road. I would hide somewhere until whoever was following us passed us. Then I would eventually come out and head for the road. I took off, yelling to get their attention. I should mention that I'm in pretty good shape, since I used to play sports in school, so I was capable of running long distances. Once I was far enough away, I got down low to the ground behind a tree and covered up with leaves and branches to camouflage myself. I was already wearing dark clothing, so I felt this was my best chance. My biggest fear came true when I could feel something crawling down my leg. I've had arachnophobia since I was little, and I've been bitten by spiders before. If not for the adrenaline, I definitely would have freaked out and given away my hiding spot. After what felt like hours, but was probably more like 2 minutes, I could hear the footsteps running away from where I was. I still wanted to play it safe, and stayed down there for another 15 minutes before I thought it was safe enough to make a break for it. Soon I was back on my feet, heading in the direction the road was in. It was now 2:17 a.m. I tried my mom and dad's cell. Neither of them picked up. So I called the house phone. Yes, we still have those. After 2 rings, my dad picked up, and he sounded pissed. I immediately told him the circumstances and about the bodies I found, and that I was separated from all my friends. While I was on the phone with him, Jordan finally noticed that I had tried to call him. So I hung up with my dad and answered Jordan's call. "Dude, where the hell are you?" "Angela and I got separated from you guys. I told her to run toward the road, while I distracted whoever was chasing us. See if you can find her there. I'm heading that way right now, so I'll be there soon." "Okay, man. Watch your ass." I ended up getting there before the rest of the group. Angela came out from her hiding place. She told me that she thought I was a goner for sure. I sent Jordan our location, and they showed up about 5 minutes later. We were all relieved to see that everyone was okay. Angela and Jordan hugged each other for about 2 minutes straight. "Hey guys, that's lovely and everything, but we really should get out of here." Once we were back in the car, I told them about what I saw in the cabin. They asked me why I hadn't called the cops yet. I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with being chased through the fucking woods." I called up the police and gave them an approximate location of where I found the bodies, but I never heard back from them. I guess whoever was out there must have hidden or destroyed the evidence. I still have reoccurring nightmares about what I saw in those woods. I grew up in Oklahoma. This happened when I was about 10, and my brother was 12. We were playing out in our front yard one afternoon when our neighbor called us over. He lived one house away, and we hadn't interacted with him before. Maybe just saying hello if we passed by when he happened to be outside. I've always been a really shy kid, so I stayed back while my brother went up and asked what he wanted. He explained that he was planning on going out of town within the next few days, and he wanted us to take care of his pool while he was gone. He said that summers were too hot for kids not to be swimming. My brother agreed, and we were told to come over in 2 days. On top of being shy, I was also very paranoid, and I had this weird feeling about our neighbor. This proposal came out of nowhere. I told my brother, "You can go if you want, but count me out." I guess my mom saw us talking to him and came outside and asked what he wanted. We explained his story. No, you two aren't going over there by yourselves. We don't even know that man." 2 days later, we still see his car in the driveway and lights on inside. Something about him bothered me. I told my parents that he never left for his vacation, so he must have been lying to us for some reason. They just sort of dismissed me and said that he probably just canceled his plans. Over the summer, I kept noticing him mowing the lawn 2 or 3 times a week. He never wore a shirt. He just went up and down his yard for hours. Once again, I would tell my parents how weird I thought he was, but they just kept brushing me off. A few more months went by, and school was back in session by now. I noticed him sitting outside his front porch every day the school bus drove by, and he would just watch us all get off, with this blank, unmoving expression. When someone is staring daggers at you like that, it makes you feel uncomfortable. Eventually, my parents decided to install a pool of our own. We had been asking for one for several years. They had to remove a large portion of our fence to get equipment into our backyard. It was one of those above-ground pools you had to anchor, but the ground here can be very rocky, and it took much longer to dig than expected. With the fence gone, our weird neighbor could now see directly into our backyard. I sometimes saw him watching from one of his windows. By the time the pool was completed, it was warm enough to go swimming. I headed outside in my swimsuit, with my clothes over the top. I immediately saw our neighbor staring at me, and decided to swim with my clothes on instead. Over time, I picked up on something. My neighbor wouldn't watch my brother and his friends, only me. The fence was eventually rebuilt, which I was glad. One day I was happily swimming in our backyard when my dad comes up to me. "Hey son, I need to talk to you for a second." I get out and I sit with him. Son, I have to say that I'm sorry. Your mom and I get really busy, and sometimes we just forget to listen. And that's not right. I'm glad you trusted your instincts. It turns out our neighbor was a very bad man. He didn't go into too much detail since I was still young, but on the school bus, some of the kids were talking. Our creepy neighbor had invited another girl from down the street to come swim in his pool. He brought her inside his house and started taking photos of her in her swimsuit, and then let her outside and told her that she needed sunscreen and would apply it for her. You get the idea. The girl's older sister came looking for her. She knew that her sister had gone inside, but he slammed the door in her face, so she ran home to tell her parents. The police were called, and he was arrested. His computer was filled with photos of children from around the area. Pictures of me could have been on it. They also found an alarming amount of CP. What still bothers me to this day is that his wife stayed by his side. Mind you, they had children who were toddlers at the time. He was convicted, but has since been released and is now back with his family. We eventually moved away for a different reason, but I can't imagine ever having to look at that man ever again. This story happened in the summer of 2011. For some background, I live in Midwest Oklahoma. My girlfriend Angela and I were renting a 4-bedroom house at the time. We were home one night chilling on the couch. At some point we both fell asleep, and I began dreaming. We were walking around our neighborhood when we saw a man trying to break into a car. He was hitting the car window with a hammer. The noise was very loud, and he wasn't trying to be discreet. I wanted to intervene, but my girlfriend held me back and then whispered into my ear, "Someone is outside our door. You need to wake up." I suddenly woke up and heard a loud noise, just like the one in my dream. My heart was pounding. I looked out the window that overlooked the front doorstep, and I saw a figure holding what looked like a hammer. I panicked and woke up my girlfriend. When she saw what was going on, she screamed. The intruder turned his attention to the window and managed to break it. Luckily for me, I always had my gun locked and loaded. The intruder was about to make his way inside when I confronted him, aiming the gun directly at his head. I shouted at the man, "You make one more move, and they'll be scraping your brains off my porch." I didn't say those exact words because I was absolutely scared out of my mind, but I did convey that I would end his life if he tried coming inside. The figure backed away with his hands up, then ran off into the darkness. I called the police right after and filed a report. We never heard anything back from them, of course. I couldn't give an accurate description, and the man took his hammer with him. He also didn't cut himself when he smashed the window, so we'll give him credit for being properly dressed for the occasion. But I'm glad I woke up in time. It's amazing how a simple dream can save your life. This story happened to my mom's friend. From here on out, I'm just going to call him Uncle. He has given me permission to share this story. This took place in the winter of 2013 in China, during the Chinese New Year. He was driving from work back to his hometown, which was in another province. It was in the middle of the night. The highway was completely empty since everyone was enjoying their celebrations rather than being out on the road. Uncle was extremely tired from work and had to drive for 10 hours on that cold winter night. He was pretty stressed out, as you can imagine. The drive was rough until he discovered a side mountain route that would save him some time, so he took it, which was a huge mistake. For those who have ever traveled to China, you know how dangerous some of the mountain roads can be, especially in the dark, with the snow falling while you're straddling on the edge of a cliff. You could die if your car slips even a tiny bit. Anyways, He took the shortcut and then noticed something right outside his driver's side back window. There seemed to be a man following his car. He was confused, since he was in a vehicle, and how could this old man possibly keep up with him? Next, he made another big mistake. He stopped, parked his car, got out, and tried to see what the hell was going on. But he saw nothing. He circled back, but still couldn't find anything, not even footprints on the ground. He thought he was just seeing things because of how tired he was, so he shook it off and got back in his car. After he began driving again, he looked in his rearview mirror. The old man was now sitting in his back seat, staring back at him through the reflection. He then blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he was on his way out of the mountain, seeing the sun rising in the distance. The old man was gone. Uncle had no clue how he was even alive after losing consciousness. By some miracle, he did not fall off the treacherous mountain roads. When he got home safely, he told his mom about what happened. His mom jokingly asked him what the old man looked like. My uncle then described him. From his facial features to his clothing, his mother looked utterly shocked. She then ran into a room, found an old photograph, and showed it to my uncle. "Was this the man you saw?" Uncle was surprised to see the man he saw in his car in the photograph. His mom began crying and told him it was her father, who had passed away before Uncle was even born. He had never seen him or his photo in the house before, since it was such a sad reminder for her. She thinks that her father was there to protect him from the dangerous mountain roads. Before this, Uncle said he did not believe in ghosts, because he was a man of science, a licensed surgeon with years of medical school under his belt. But what he experienced on the mountain that night has forever changed his perception. I'm a 20-year-old woman, and this event occurred 4 years ago, when I was around 16. It was during the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school. I've encountered several unsettling situations living in West Virginia, but this remains one of the most disturbing. I'll recount the events as accurately as I can. This happened in Cherry River, just before it flows into Nicholas County. My friend and I drove separately and met at a pull-off along the main road to do some fishing. Next to the pull-off was a place called State Road Garage. It was enclosed by a fence that required a key for entry. At the time, I didn't know its purpose, but later research revealed that it belongs to the West Virginia Department of Transportation. To the left of the building is a short trail that led down to the river. That evening, the garage appeared to be deserted, with no cars or workers in sight. The only vehicle we noticed was a weathered pickup truck, possibly an old Silverado, with a camper shell on the back. I can vividly recall the 3 deadbolt locks securing the camper shell to the frame, and 2 very unsettling individuals sitting in the front. The truck was parked far into the trail's entrance, on rough terrain, while we parked by the main road. We didn't want to risk getting stuck. This immediately put me on edge, as I've been watching true crime and scary stories on YouTube since I was 11. This scene felt like the opening of a horror story. From what I recall, the truck's occupants were a disheveled blonde woman who appeared worn down and possibly missing teeth, and a greasy, long-haired man in a wife-beater. Crackheads are never able to hide their addiction that well. As we passed their truck on the way to the river, they locked eyes with us, staring intently. My friend seemed less concerned than I was. I tend to be a bit paranoid naturally. Strange characters are common to our area. Most of them are harmless, but I never let my guard down. My friend mentioned that she should call her boyfriend, who lived 20 minutes away, if anything happened, though I wasn't sure how that would help in the moment. We began fishing, and my friend caught a rock bass. Not long after, we heard footsteps and looked up to see the woman from the truck approaching the riverbank. She looked rough. She may have been an attractive woman once upon a time, but the prolonged drug use had taken its toll. Her teeth were severely damaged, giving her jaw that sunken appearance, and her skin resembled a crumpled up paper bag. She was holding a red Kodak camera. When she got to the riverbank, she asked, "Can you tell me your first and last name and ages?" She then told us that she was taking photos for a newspaper. My alarm bells were going off big time. My friend and I had made plenty of poor decisions in our teens, but I was always weary of strangers, especially in this context. But I panicked and gave my first name, but lied about my age, subtracting just 1 year. A pointless fib that wouldn't have mattered if our details were being collected. I didn't give my last name, and I can't recall what my friend said. The woman then asked, "Can I take your picture?" Despite my unease, I was a people pleaser and reluctantly agreed. She snapped our photo and started back toward her truck, tripping on the rocks as she went. My friend and I stifled giggles at the odd encounter. A short time later, my friend's fishing line broke, and we headed back to our cars. To my frustration, halfway back she told me that she had forgotten her tackle box by the river. Every instinct screamed not to go back, but I knew it wasn't a good idea for her to go back alone. So I reluctantly followed her back down to the riverbank. On our way back, we encountered the man from the truck. He reeked like he had been bathing in a shit bath. "Have y'all seen my girlfriend?" His question was odd. They had been together in the truck before the woman approached us. This felt like a setup, straight out of a human trafficking scenario. Alarmed, we told him, "Yeah, she went that way," pointing in the opposite direction of our fishing spot. He nodded and wandered off. I urged my friend to leave, baffled by her insistence that everything was fine. I was on high alert, half expecting the couple to charge at us with weapons. I scanned the area, noting that the rocks along the river could be used as potential defense and planning escape routes. The silence that set in was eerie. Maybe they left, or maybe they were waiting. About 10 minutes later, a blood-chilling scream echoed from upriver. It sounded like the woman from the truck. Terrified, we bolted into the forest, away from the river, and through the dense thicket. There was no trail, just a patch of trees parallel to the main path. The scream seemed to come from near the trail's entrance, so we couldn't risk heading that way. We came out of the tree line along the main road, downstream from our cars, and we sprinted to them. We tossed our tangled up fishing gear inside and locked our doors. As we caught our breath, we see the couple rushing back to their truck. I was honestly surprised to see that the woman was still alive. They glared at us before hopping into their truck and speeding off. My friend and I sat there and tried to process the whole ordeal, watching the road in shock. Minutes later, the old Silverado flew past us again, heading in the opposite direction. The woman was leaning out of the passenger window with her camera, and she snapped another picture of us. My friend pulled out behind them, and so did I, and we followed her. My friend recorded herself reciting the license plate number to remember it. The truck veered into back roads and eventually lost us. We drove to my grandmother's house nearby and told her everything. She agreed that we should call the police. An officer eventually came and took our statements, but I worried he didn't take us seriously. He said he would run the license plate, but we never heard back. I've always wondered who those people were and what they had planned. Somewhere, there may be some photos of my friend and I, awkwardly holding our fishing poles, possibly labeled with our names and ages, pinned to a corkboard in a dark room. It was about a year after this happened that the Donald Ray Lands and the Jean K. Whitefeather case became headline news around here. They were a couple who adopted 5 black children from a Minnesota shelter and forced them into labor as slaves on their property. The couple that we encountered were not them, But it does make me wonder what could have happened to us that day. The woman screaming could have been a ruse to get us somewhere so they could force us into the back of that Silverado. Our parents might have never known our fate, which still bothers me to think about. I've searched local news websites and online articles, but I found nothing about the couple we encountered that day. I still go fishing often, but I've never returned to that spot. A few years ago, during what was likely the darkest chapter of my life, I worked overnight shifts at a Walmart supercenter in rural West Virginia, 6 nights a week, from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. I stocked everything from fishing lures to makeup. It was soul-crushing work, a fluorescent lit void where apathy died. Let's be real, Walmart already has a creepy undercurrent to it, but this 24-hour outpost amplified it. In the dead of night, it drew a parade of locals, meth heads and opioid zombies, wandering the aisles, scavenging for forgotten deals. No security guards patrolled, and I would later learn that most of the cameras, especially those in the parking lot, had been glitchy for months, if not years. As one of the few young women who worked on the overnight crew, I attracted plenty of unwanted attention, but the standout was this guy who materialized every time I stepped out for a smoke break, no matter the hour, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. He would round the corner within seconds, launching into chatter like we had planned it or something. It really didn't matter which of the entrances I used. He was always there. At first, I figured that he was an employee. Who else would be hanging around a dingy box store in the witching hours? Most of us smoked during our 2 15-minute breaks, so the coincidence seemed plausible. But this wasn't the case. He didn't work there. He would just mimic the overnight uniform by wearing dark blue t-shirts. I quit going out alone, sticking to breaks with guy friends from the crew, including one that I had known since middle school. But even that didn't faze him, and it turned into an inside joke across the store. I was unsettled but not panicked until my stalker ramped things up. He'd grill me about my relationship status and would ask me about it every chance he got. I was deep into GTA 5 then, so I spun a yarn about my terrifying long-distance boyfriend Trevor from Northern California. Hey, it fit the vibe. But he just shrugged it off. Eventually I dropped the niceties and started ghosting him mid-sentence. One night my go-to guy friend had called out sick, and the others were tied up across the store. I headed out with 2 older women from my crew. They finished quickly and went inside. I lingered for a final drag, and just as I turned to follow, he popped up. Looking back, it wouldn't be crazy to assume that he was in a car, scoping out the entrances with a pair of binoculars. He grabbed my hand, not a vice grip, but firm enough. "Come to my car real quick. I want to show you something." I'm not hot-tempered by nature, but my rage boiled over. I yanked free and bolted inside, my heart pounding in my chest. I stormed to the head manager and spilled it all. It turns out my stalker had a cousin on the unloading crew in the back, which was his excuse for loitering. The cousin was mortified, swearing that he'd handle it. But management? Fucking useless. No warning, no banishment, just shrugs and says, not our problem. I quit soon after, not over the stalking directly, more so the brass's incompetence. A friend of mine later clued me in. The guy kept lurking around nightly, shifting his creep routine to another woman. He hounded folks for weeks after I left, desperate for my name and address. Then one day, he disappeared. To this day, I still fixate on those busted out parking lot cameras and wonder if on one of those endless, exhausting nights, would anyone have noticed if I had just vanished? I'm 32 now, and this happened over a decade ago, but it still keeps me awake at night. It was late 2011. I was fresh out of high school, scraping by as a busboy at a small diner in Washington, D.C., before college kicked in that January. My buddy Alex, who I've been tight with since middle school, and myself decided to shake off the city grind with a weekend getaway. Some friends of ours had rented a cabin in the backwoods of West Virginia, tucked in the hollers near Summersville Lake, about a 3-hour drive from the Beltway. It was supposed to be bonfires, brews, and fishing. Sounded like a good time. We piled into my 1990 Honda Accord. It looked like a piece of shit, but it ran perfectly, and had a collection of CDs I'd spin on long drives. I was really into Dark Throne back then. The drive started easy, the Beltway crawl into I-66, then west through the Shenandoah Haze. But as the sun began to set around 6 p.m., we missed a turn at a sketchy, unmarked fork and ended up going down the wrong way. Yes, we made a wrong turn in West Virginia. The irony is not lost on me. The GPS was no help. I figured we were in some kind of dead zone. Neither of our phones were cooperating either. Screw it. Let's just see what's at the end of the road, Alex said. As we snaked deeper into the forest, the pavement gave way to gravel that crunched like teeth under our tires. The sky darkened, and the headlights became the only sources of light. There were no streetlights, no houses, just endless pine trees bordering the road. Then, the road pinched into a single lane, flanked by a barbed wire fence. A faded signpost was lit up by the beams. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Slow down. This might be it. I hope you're right. Having a double-barrel shotgun go up my ass is not on the bucket list. We rounded the bend and came to a clearing. There was a faint porch lamp on a run-down cabin that looked like it had been gnawed by termites. Clothesline stretched between crooked poles. One of the lines appeared to have several carcasses dangling from it. At first, I thought it was a hunter's haul, but as we crept closer, the beams swept over the hanging bodies, and my breath caught in my throat. I'll admit that I'm not used to seeing skinned and gutted deer torsos, but there was something about the body at the end of the line that broke me. It seemed different from the others, human-like, or at least it used to be, before someone hacked off the arms and opened up the chest. I knew this was completely fucked when I felt bile rising in my throat. I had to look away and regain my senses. I don't recall seeing a head, by the way. Holy shit, is that a person? Alex whispered. I didn't say a word. I quickly put the car into reverse and slammed down on the gas pedal, backing away from the clotheslines. I had to make a 3-point turn to get out of there, because there was no way I was going back down that narrow dirt road in reverse. However, in my panic, I didn't pay attention, and the back of my car crashed into a couple of drum barrels. Shit! What was that? I don't care. We're getting out of here. When I put the car back into drive and sped toward the dirt road, I swear I saw a figure standing next to a shed about 15 yards away from us. I only saw it for a brief second because we were hauling ass out of there. Alex was so freaked out, he started babbling nonsense while I white-knuckled the wheel, my vision tunneling. Whoever was standing next to the shed didn't chase us. I was expecting an arrow in the tires, with the headlights of a pickup truck closing in behind us. If we actually saw a dismembered body hanging from a line, I doubt whoever did that would want us talking to the police. We barreled back the way we came from and made our way out to the highway. As soon as a bar signal flickered on my phone, we pulled over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. After I relayed what happened, a police cruiser slowly rolled up behind us a short time later. If you were passing by on the highway, you would have thought we had been pulled over. We explained everything. I remember being embarrassed about my voice cracking. They listened to our story with blank faces, then exchanged a skeptical look. The older officer spoke up. Sounds like you boys stumbled onto Old Man Hargrove's spread. He's a hunter, been at it for 40 years. And that body was probably a gutted buck. There's been no reports of missing folk around here. I know about it. The shadows play tricks in the hollers, or maybe y'all just been hitting the sauce. I insisted that the disemboweled body I saw looked human, but the officers laughed it off. Look, y'all just got a bit turned around is all. Stay on Route 19 next time. He then gave us a patronizing warning about trespassing fines and told us to be safe. We drove the rest of the way in silence. There were no follow-ups. On the flip side, we ended up having a great time at the cabin, and even used our experience to entertain the rest of the group when it came time to sit around the fire and tell ghost stories. Despite what you may have heard about West Virginia, it really is a scenic sanctuary. Looking back all these years later, I stand by what I saw, and so does Alex. I've seen more pictures of hanging animal remains than I care to admit, and I'm telling you, we saw the body of someone who met a gruesome fate. I don't know who it was, but what we saw that night was the conclusion to one of the many missing person cases in rural West Virginia. When I was around 17, the year was 2017. Urbex had become pretty popular on YouTube, and living in a small town in Minnesota, there was no shortage of abandoned places to explore if you knew where to look, so I decided to hop on the trend. There was a 3-story mansion just outside of Asante, about 50 miles north of Minneapolis, that had been abandoned for around 20 years. The mansion itself was literally in the middle of nowhere. There were several rumors about what happened at that place, from an entire family being murdered by an escaped psychopath to some kind of deformed man living there. The true story is much less exciting. The owner was in major debt, went broke, and his house was eventually repossessed by the bank. They tried to turn it into a rental property, but a severe mold infestation prevented that. Ever since, it just sat, empty, and rotting away. I talked to my group of friends about exploring the place for a possible YouTube video. We would make a quick walkthrough with just me and another friend, David, to check things out before bringing the entire gang along with the camera gear. One Saturday night, around 11 p.m., David and I parked on a back road about a quarter mile away from the destination. We really didn't want to get caught. The police around here are pretty bored most of the time, and would have jumped at the chance to arrest a couple of teenagers for trespassing. The house sat on a 3-acre property, mostly surrounded by forest. We hiked through the trees, making sure we kept our flashlight use to a minimum, until we came upon the old house. Our original plan was to go through the back door, but it was locked, so we decided to go around to the front of the house and try our luck there. We entered a porch area that appeared to have been screened in at some point, but was now just metal frames with shreds of mesh hanging from them. There was also an assortment of old furniture, lawn chairs, and wooden crates. After looking around for a bit and snapping some photos, we approached a pair of double doors, only to see that they were chained shut. Most of the windows we saw were either boarded up or completely smashed out. We wanted to avoid entering through a broken window if we could, but it looked like we would have no choice. So we found an opening on the ground level, on the other side of the house. As we approached, I got this strange feeling like something terrible was about to happen. I knew the rumors of what took place here were just made-up stories, but standing outside the dark, abandoned mansion in the dead of night was enough to make even a skeptic like me second-guess himself. And just because those stories never happened, didn't mean nothing ever bad happened here. I'll admit that my apprehension did involve some concern about spooky ghosts. I grabbed David's shoulder and stopped him from going any further. "What's the problem?" "I thought I heard something. Just listen." In truth, I hadn't heard anything. I just wanted him to stop walking so we could both listen before entering the old house. We were approaching the open window from an angle, so we couldn't see directly into it. But it's a good thing we stopped when we did, because what we heard next was far scarier than what I had initially been concerned about. The pump of a shotgun is a sound that immediately grabs your attention, and that's exactly what we heard coming from the open window. As soon as we heard it, David and I hauled ass in the opposite direction, running back toward the front porch and making our way around the other side of the house, the way we had come from. As soon as we made it back to the tree line, we heard a gunshot coming from the mansion. I'm not 100% sure if someone was firing at us, because the blast did sound like it came from somewhere inside the mansion, but we weren't sticking around to find out. We backtracked to the car and got the hell out of there. Needless to say, we never ended up filming an Urbex video there. I'm not sure what was taking place inside that old mansion the night we went there, but someone was inside that house with a loaded shotgun. It could have been just some vandal putting in some target practice, but something tells me they were waiting for us to come within the direct line of sight of that open window. Shotgun aimed. I don't know that for sure. They could have just stayed quiet and we would have kept going toward the window. But for whatever reason, they decided to pump their shotgun, alerting us to their presence. I suppose if they really wanted us dead, I wouldn't be here now, telling this story. This event effectively ended my Urbex aspirations. We never returned to Shotgun Manor. But as far as I'm aware, it still sits there to this day, silent, but empty. I couldn't tell you.
On the evening of December 22nd, 1989, the Harris family of Dryden, New York, received the final visitor of their lives. One after the other, Tony Harris, his wife Dolores, and their 2 younger children were tied up, shot in the head, doused with gasoline, and then set alight. Their charred corpses were discovered the following morning, after a neighbor complained to the fire department about a smoke alarm going off on their property. Disturbingly, the police stated that the Harris' home showed no signs of forced entry, leading them to believe that their killer had either snuck in through an open door or maybe a window, but was highly unlikely, given the frigid outdoor temperatures, or that the killer was someone they knew and trusted. In light of how difficult it was to discern any kind of motive, the investigation into the murders quickly stalled, and local law enforcement reached out to the FBI for more extensive assistance. FBI agents discovered that a brown van had been taken from the Harris' family garage, one that was later discovered in a parking lot of a nearby mall. Police also declared that they wished to speak with a cyclist seen riding through the area shortly before nightfall on December 22nd. Frustratingly, not a single witness came forward, and this further slowed an already difficult investigation. Back at the Harris' home, Christmas wreaths and red ribbons had been joined by yellow crime scene tape. The family had moved there just 3 years prior, after Tony was offered a job at Deanco, a Syracuse-based electronic equipment distributor. His wife Dolores, or Dodie as she was known, was a popular figure in the neighborhood, frequently organizing bake sales and cookie exchanges while running a small crafts and gift shop out of the family home. The murders stunned the local community, with Tompkins County Sheriff Robert Howard stating that there hadn't been a murder in the area in a long time. Naturally, the Harris' neighbors were horrified by such a brutal slaying, who stated that their suburb of Ellis Hollow was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. For a horrific crime to happen there, something had to have gone very wrong. At the family's collective funeral, loved ones and neighbors described them as active and well-liked members of the community. "You can't think of anyone that would have a grudge against them," said Ann Parzale, a friend of Mrs. Harris. "People can't understand how it could happen. This is a very wholesome, family-oriented community. Those things aren't supposed to happen here, inside this community," added Edgar Clemens, who was a retired school teacher and had lived on Ellis Hollow Road for 26 years. "I don't think anybody around here slept Saturday night. I've opened the door to people whose cars have broken down. I don't think I'll do that anymore." Police quickly uncovered a suspect, however, an ex-con known as Michael Kinge, and set about tracking him down. Yet when they finally cornered him at his apartment complex, Kinge produced a shotgun, placed it under his chin, and threatened to kill himself. The cops held their fire, promising to bring in a trained negotiator in hopes of de-escalating the situation. But before that negotiator could arrive, Kinge aimed the shotgun at police officers and fired. Thankfully, the shot sent lead fragments spraying harmlessly above their heads, and law enforcement's return fire was considerably more accurate. But before he fell, Kinge turned the shotgun on himself, racked a shell into the chamber, and fired. The Tompkins County medical examiner found that the shots Kinge fired in his attempt at suicide had merely grazed the left side of his face, and it was the police's small caliber handgun ammunition that actually put him down. However, given the circumstances of Kinge firing a shot at them, his death was ruled a justifiable homicide. Obviously, Kinge was never put on trial for the murders, but his suicide by cops situation was seen by many as a tantamount to his admission of guilt. This was later confirmed when a sawed-off rifle found in the suspect's apartment was positively identified as the weapon used to kill the Harris family. Kinge's mother was wrongly convicted of being involved in the murders and ended up being a major police scandal. But aside from this horrifying miscarriage of justice, the really disturbing thing is that the motive behind the killings was never determined. No one knows why a small-time crook like Michael Kinge just suddenly snapped and chose the most wonderful time of the year for one of the most heinous crimes in history. I've known for a while that I wanted to submit this story, but I felt odd about it since I'm still friends with some of the guy's family and would feel like a total shitbag if it was ever seen. However, I've been home with the kids reading today and got pissed that I read all of your stories and was fresh out of creepy material. So to be part of the solution, I guess, here we go. I'm a member of the slam poetry scene. Basically, it's an excuse to get people to listen to a performance poetry by adding a competitive element to things. After running through the small scene in my city and wanting to branch out and push my career further, I started visiting places within driving distance that I could spit. This led me to Charlotte, North Carolina. I started on their local team venue, where you compete to be a part of a squad that goes to a national competition every year. I was doing well and was accepted into the local crew pretty readily. This led to longer stays and features at some of the other venues in the city. I started going to one that was particularly popular. It was good for selling CDs, and this is where I met this guy. He worked as a bar back, occasionally got on stage and shared. Frankly, it was always shitty poems. He was the brother of the host and everyone knew and liked him. He began flirting with me more and more. Although in my loose days, searching for acceptance and love everywhere, something always kept me leery. I'd gladly accept the drinks he sent over, smoke his weed with the group in the stockroom between sets, and hang out at parties and other events. But I always had this tickle in my gut, warning me to not get close. But over a year or two, we continued to become friends. After a while, he started calling and texting me more often, poking me on Facebook daily, sending messages about wanting to be more than friends, and he wanted to find a snow bunny and settle down. Again, I never entertained it. There's just something gnawing at me. The crazy in his eyes was too hard to miss. Eventually, I moved to Denver to take a position teaching poetry and work at a friend's law firm. The second Christmas that I was there, I got a call. One of my friends from Charlotte relayed the following message. He'd found his white girl and gotten married. They seemed happy at first, but slowly began fighting more and more. It spilled over into the venue, and often they had to be separated by friends from physically attacking one another in public. One friend, later thinking back, remembers the last time that she saw them together. Him pushing his wife, following by her throwing a drink in his face, and scratching his neck deep enough to draw blood. She said after the couple had been dragged away from each other, she sat with him and smoked a cigarette. She says she laughed and said, "You guys are gonna kill each other." Around Christmas of last year, his wife stopped coming to the bi-weekly events they both attended regularly. He explained it away that they were on a break. Time goes by. No one really questions that they hadn't seen or heard from her in quite a while, thinking she was breaking from the whole scene in order to put distance between herself and her husband. Her parents, however, hadn't heard from their daughter since Thanksgiving dinner. They would call him, and he would say everything was fine and blow them off. This continues until a week after Christmas, knowing their daughter would never miss a holiday, at least without a call. They call the police and send them over to the couple's home for a well body check. The cops arrive. They knock on the door and are let in. They ask him where she is. He replies that she's still in the bedroom. He shows them to the room where she lay there, dead for weeks, rotting in their bed. Oh, and he killed her little dog too. During this time, he'd been attending events, hosting hip-hop nights, and even publishing a blog on making a marriage work. on one of the local organization sites, never once letting on that every night he was going home and sleeping with his murdered wife. The sickest part of all of this, he is a child from another relationship, a daughter whom he gets to celebrate with every other holiday. That Christmas they opened gifts, had dinner, cuddled up on the couch and watched movies, less than 100 feet from her decaying stepmother. I don't know what would have happened if I'd ever taken him up on the offer to date. But I do know, me and my gut are going to stay on speaking terms, and I will always listen to it. This happened in December of 2011 when I was on a college semester break. I grew up in rural Texas with about 1,000 people in my hometown. Shortly after my parents divorced, I moved to a larger city for college and made it a tradition every year to visit my family for the holidays in the boonies of Texas. After the divorce, my mom had recently moved to a nearby town, only 100 people, where her house was located. It was on the very outskirts of town, surrounded by miles and miles of cornfields in almost every direction. There was a side paved road that was about 100 feet off of her house that basically was a dead end until you reached a certain point. Then directly across the other side of the road was in fact miles of fields of corn. The only neighbor that she had was half a mile north of her house, who was a truck driver and was basically never home much of the year. I'm telling you all of this so you know how secluded my mother's house really truly was. The closest town from here was 15 to 20 miles away. This winter break was different because my mother and brother were going to travel to Boston to visit my grandparents. My mom needed someone to sit the dog. After a few days of having the house to myself in the middle of nowhere, I'm getting kind of bored. So I decided to put the harness on my dog and take a walk out into the area in no particular direction. We end up following that dead-end road and then turn back as it starts to get darker. The wind's picking up because a cold front was coming through. At this time, I'm slightly more frustrated with myself because I could start to smell the rain. And my dog can be particularly stubborn. He likes to walk me instead of the other way around. Anyway, as we start walking back, it's getting colder and colder. Now it's drizzling, and I'm walking a bit faster. We're damn near almost to a jog, heading back to the house, when all of a sudden, my dog stops abruptly. Initially, I just think it's him being stubborn, but he starts leading me in the direction of the cornfield. I'm thinking this is one of those cases where he just locks onto a scent and just cannot let it go until he directly goes up to it, or I have to pick him back up and lead him back on track. I don't allow him to get very far, and we're directly in front of the fields. And then all of a sudden, he starts barking, similar to how he barks when he sees another person, and he's not friendly to other people. I finally get tired of all this. I pick him up and we run back home, both now damp and cold. Once back inside, I dry up and take a bath. It's now evening time. I make something to eat, and my dog and I start winding down for the night. We watch a bit of TV in the living room, and by 10 p.m., we call it for the night. It's still very much windy outside this time though, and that storm never really died down. We go into the bedroom. My dog burrows underneath the blankets, and I pass out shortly after. Several hours later, I wake up to my dog growling on my bed in the direction of the window. I hear rustling outside, and I think it's likely just another animal, but I'm still kind of drowsy, so I get out of bed and pick up my dog to corral him to the living room, where I turn on the TV to drown out those rustling noises. My dog burrows underneath the blankets again, and I'm just about to fall asleep when I hear a thud outside. I'm like, what the hell was that? And of course, my dog is now wide awake again, barking and growling underneath the blankets. I'm wide awake now. I'm getting annoyed with my dog. I turn up the TV, trying to drown out all those noises outside once again. 25 minutes later, at 1:30 a.m., I hear a knock on the back door. Now all hell breaks loose with my dog. He's literally about to jump off the couch and dash to the door. I caught him last minute, and just to hold him in place while we're both freaking out. I'm hoping to God that I didn't hear that, hoping that it was just my imagination. My dog started to calm down. I'm thinking maybe I did imagine that. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe there's a period of time where I just don't remember anything. Shortly thereafter, I don't hear any more rustling leaves coming from outside. My dog goes back to being silent and burrows underneath the blankets once more. Cue the doze off to slumberland, only to wake up 30 minutes later to another knock, but now it's on the front door. I literally feel my heart pumping so damn fast. I grab the landline and dial 911. My dog is now at the front door barking ferociously. I reach the adjacent town's 911 emergency service and frantically state what's all happening and why my dog is freaking out. The police from the adjacent town was on their way, but it was going to take a while to get to my house. I stay on the phone with the dispatcher and things start to calm down again. And I tell them that I'm pretty sure I can handle it from here at least until the police arrive. I hang up and very carefully look out the side window, only to see a man standing directly in front of the door. No movement from him at all, just a blank stare at the door. I grab the mace and my dog and state very loudly to him, the police are on their way. I get no response back. I'm thinking this guy has to be on drugs at this point. I end up going to the front door. I yank it open, and the doors in this house have a secondary door with a windowed screen. It's locked and would take some effort to get inside because the screen is triple pane. I look into his face and ask what the hell he wants. Told him the police are about to be here. He just stares blankly, paused for what must have been the longest 20 seconds of my life, opens up his mouth and asks if I want to play a game with him. After that, I immediately shut the door and yell back ferociously, absolutely not. I waited in the bedroom, watched him on my front porch for about 5 minutes, just staring blankly at the door, no movement whatsoever. He finally turns around and just walks away. 20 minutes later, the cops show up. I'm describing everything frantically to them. I literally peed my pants earlier. That's how terrifying everything was. The cops then basically state that there's a guy in my town that has schizophrenia and is going through late stages of Alzheimer's, and sometimes he wanders around people's house. Needless to say, they found him and took him back to his caretakers. They asked if I had anywhere else to go, and I basically packed everything up and bolted to my father's house with my dog, and then stayed there for the remainder of the break. I always tell people that bartending isn't as glamorous as they think. Sure, you've got your free drinks and your regulars who tip big if you keep their glasses full, but it's a grind. Long hours of drunk people spilling their life stories all over you. Constant hum of music and chatter that almost drills into your skull. When I was younger, it was a pretty decent gig. It paid the bills and kept my fridge stocked. Gave me enough extra to feel like I wasn't just scraping by. But to me, it was never really more than that. It was just a job. The worst part though, at least in my opinion, was the holidays. We didn't get to skip out on Christmas, New Year's, or even the other days that most people spent with their families. The bar still opened, and somebody had to be there to sling drinks for those who didn't have anywhere else to go, or didn't want to. We tried to spread the misery around, divvying up the shifts so nobody got stuck with all those crappy days, but it was still a roll of the dice. And that year, you guessed it, my number came up for Christmas. "Just think about the tips," my boss said with a grin, handing me the schedule. I gave a fake smile back, but my jaw was clenched so hard, I thought my teeth might crack. The truth was, the tips didn't make up for it. Christmas at the bar was this weird mix of festive and depressing. We decorated the place with tinsel and those cheap string lights that blinked like they were on their last leg. The TV's playing old Christmas movies with the volume low, while a mix of holiday classics and rock ballads blared out from the jukebox. We even had a few peppermint-themed drink specials that nobody ever wanted. The crowd that came in was always pretty predictable, mostly regulars, the same old guys who occupied the same stools every week, nursing their beers and swapping stories about when life was better. But Christmas would always bring a few wild cards. The lonely ones, looking for somewhere to go or somebody to talk to. They'd wander in with red noses and wide eyes, clinging to their coats like they'd been outside just long enough to lose all their warmth. I tried to not think about what it all meant, being here instead of, well, anywhere else. Just keep my head down, pour a few drinks, and watch the clock crawl towards closing time. When I noticed the guy at the far end of the bar, he was half hidden in the shadows, and I don't remember seeing him come in, but there he was, staring at me like he was waiting for me to do something. "Doing okay over there?" I called out, forcing a smile. He didn't answer me, just tilted his head slightly. The night dragged on, the usual lull that followed the initial holiday rush. People were drinking slowly now, most of them looking at their watches, ready to leave to go wherever the night was going to take them. But that man didn't move. He continuously watched me from the end of the bar, and it was starting to get under my skin. His eyes almost seemed to never leave me, dark and unreadable. I kept busy, wiping the counter down, pouring drinks, and trying my best not to glance over at him. But it was like he was pulling my attention and forcing it back to him. I tried to brush it off, but the longer I worked, the more uncomfortable I started to feel. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Can I get you anything else?" I asked, setting the glass down that I'd been cleaning. His voice was low and there was an edge to it. "You got any of that special drink you were talking about earlier, the peppermint one?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "We got a few, they're on the specials menu." He gave a single nod and still didn't break eye contact. I turned away to fix it. The feeling of his gaze stayed with me though, gnawing at the back of my neck. I handed him the drink, but he didn't move to take it. Instead, he just sat there, staring. "You're not gonna tell me what's really going on, are you?" he said. I paused, my hand still hovering near his glass. I blinked and was completely unsure of how to respond to him. "Excuse me?" "I know something about you," he said, leaning forward just slightly. "You don't belong here. Not tonight." I forced out a laugh. It's just a job. I'm here like everybody else." He didn't laugh with me. His head tilted again. The rest of the night seemed to pass in a blur. The bar cleared out and just a few of the regulars were left, nursing their drinks. Occasionally I would steal glances at the man, but he never took his eyes off me. Every time I turned, I felt his gaze follow. He had not moved from that spot, but I had this distinct feeling that he really wasn't sitting anymore. He was waiting. By the time I finished cleaning up, the place was almost empty, save for a few people who were still finishing their drinks. I locked up and hit the lights and grabbed my coat. That cold hit me immediately as I stepped outside. My car was parked near the back of the lot, half buried underneath fresh snow. I had planned to call for a tow truck, but I thought better of it. It's Christmas Eve. I didn't want to bother anybody on a night like this, so I just figured I'd walk home. My walk really isn't that long. It's only about 1.5 miles, but in the freezing cold with the snow biting at my skin, it would feel like an eternity. The streetlights flickered in the distance. The world felt quiet. As I reached that first intersection, I checked both ways. No cars, no movement. The street was still, just like the rest of the city. I took a quick breath and stepped onto the crosswalk, and that's when I heard footsteps. At first, they seemed distant, almost like I wasn't sure what I was hearing, especially with the wind howling and the snow crunching beneath me. When I turned, I saw him. There he was again, the man from the bar. I froze. He was walking in my exact footsteps, keeping pace. His head was down and his breath was rising up in clouds. I quickened my pace, the heels of my boots clicking against the pavement faster now, but when I looked back, he had closed the distance. I glanced around. No cars, no businesses. The street was empty. It was just me and him. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice shaky. "The hell do you want from me?" He didn't answer me. My pulse pounded in my ears as I walked faster. He was still behind me, matching every step. I was almost home now though, just a few more blocks. But then I heard him shout, "You don't belong here," he yelled, his voice harsh and twisted. "You never did." I was close enough now that I could see my house at the end of the block. His footsteps were still behind me, closing in, and I could swear that I heard his breath now, heavy and shallow. Before I could make a move, I felt his hand on my shoulder. My scream was in my throat, but it caught in my chest as I was shoved hard against the cold brick of a building. His breath was hot against my ear, his body pressing in close around me. "Please," I gasped, struggling to free myself. "Get off me, what do you want?" I got no response, only his grip tightened, and for a moment I thought this was it. I would be left out here in the dark, no one to help and no one to stop him. And that's when I heard another shout. I looked up, trying to focus through my panic. Across the street, I saw 3 men walking toward me. their eyes wide with alarm. They were carrying something, cases, musical equipment maybe. They set them down in the snow and quickly rushed toward us. "Get off her!" one of the men yelled, his voice deep and pretty commanding. The man who'd been holding me stepped back and muttered something under his breath. He turned and quickly ran down an alley before the trio of men could even reach me. Those men stayed with me as I shakily called the police. They were kind, offered reassurance while they kept their eyes on the alley. It felt like forever before the police finally showed up, and when they did, they couldn't really find any trace of the man. I still didn't feel safe, even with them there. Those men insisted on escorting me home, making sure that I got inside without any more incident. When I finally closed that door behind me, I breathed a sigh of relief, but even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone. The man had seen something in me, and something that I couldn't quite explain. But thankfully, I never saw him again.
Back in September 2019, I ended up meeting up with a girl in the comments section of a Facebook post. She was really pretty and seemed really cool, so after a few weeks of talking, I decided to drive all the way from White Plains to Pittsburgh just so we could hang out for a weekend. I remember a friend asking something to the effect of, "Have you talked to her much on the phone?" And I told him we'd spoken a little, but that we'd mostly talked via text and Facebook Messenger. And he recommended that we talk in long form and about a lot of different stuff too. Otherwise, I might get a nasty surprise. Well, I guess he was right. And now I won't bore you with all of the details, but let's just say me and this girl weren't nearly as compatible as I'd hoped. And then while I'd originally planned on staying the whole weekend so me and her could get some food, maybe catch a movie, I decided to just cut my losses and drive back to New York on Saturday evening. I figured if I hit the road at around 7 p.m. I could be back home by around 1 the next morning. And no doubt I'd be exhausted by the time I got home, but not too beat that I'd risk getting into an accident or anything. So with my mind made up, that's what I did. After getting a quick bite to eat, I was on the 22 by 7:30, and then after 3 hours of driving with the setting sun in my rear view, I saw a sign for Rosecrans, PA. It had been dark for maybe 30 to 40 minutes, and I remember seeing a Sunoco gas station all lit up just off the highway to my left. Then just a mile or two up the road, and in timeless fashion, my gas gauge lit up with a low gas warning. Maybe that's just my luck, that it never lights up as I'm approaching a gas station, only ever when it's just a speck in my rear view. But I was also driving on one of those divided highways, the kind with a whole-ass miniature park between the two stretches of highway, and this obviously meant that there was no turning around for miles. And then I asked my phone, "Hey Siri, where's the next gas station?" And then my phone started talking about another gas station that I'd find if I turned onto US 15. I'd have to drive another 20 to 30 minutes or so, but it was there, and I wasn't about to run out of gas and get stranded like an idiot. And I remember checking the highway ahead of me and not seeing any other cars behind me or ahead of me, so I thought it was safe to actually look at my phone screen to make sure that I'd take the right turn. And I swear to God, I looked for no longer than 2 seconds at the most, and then when I brought my eyes back to the road, there she was, dead ahead of me. I slammed on my brakes, almost giving myself whiplash in the process, but I kept control of my car. The girl went from being a faintly lit shape on the furthest and dimmest reaches of my headlights to being only 5 feet in front of me. And while my first instincts were to yell, "Are you effing crazy?" at her, I quickly realized why she'd been walking in the middle of the highway. She looked to be in a bad, bad way. Her clothes were all torn up, and there was blood in her hair from what looked like a head wound, and I didn't see it until she climbed into my passenger seat, but she wasn't wearing any shoes either. The moment my car stopped, she limped around to my passenger side and then tried to open up the door. I keep it locked out of habit, so her first attempt did nothing but make a dull wrenching sound. But that was soon followed by this blood-curdling screech of, "Open the door, I'm begging you, please!" I still had zero clue what was going on, so my first reaction was to spin around in my seat just in case who or whatever had hurt her was close by. I didn't open my car door right away, because obviously if I was going to carjack someone, using a pretty girl in distress as bait seems like a very effective tactic. But when I didn't see anyone, and when the girl gave me another very convincing cry of "please help me," I guess that seeing the blood up close and hearing the genuine terror in her scream, they kind of overrode my paranoia. Then after taking one final look at her, I unlocked my car, and she practically dove into the back seat before slamming the door closed behind her. And as I took off again, she says, "Mister, we need to move. We're not going fast enough. They're going to catch us." And so I put my foot down as I asked who they were. She said she didn't know. They just took her. And it was then that I noticed the handcuffs around her left wrist. One cuff was still locked around it, but the other just hung there awkwardly. I didn't need any more information other than that. I just put my foot down and burned rubber for a few miles till I thought that we were at a safe distance. I checked my rear view a few times, and then when I didn't see any lights, I slowed from around 70 to a pretty safe 35. But as we started to slow, the girl started yelling. And she says, "Why are you slowing down?" And before I could even answer, she says, "Go faster, what are you doing? They're going to be following me." I'm kind of freaking out internally, but I told her there was no one in sight, and we also wouldn't be going anywhere if a cop came the other way and caught us doing a buck and change. But then she says, "You don't get it. We want the cops. If those guys catch me, they'll kill you too." And I guess when you think about it, I didn't doubt that. If whoever she was talking about had been willing to handcuff her before trying to crack her head open, I have no doubt that they'd put a bullet in me to get her back. It was also kind of a relief to hear that thing about the cops too, because when I saw the handcuffs, there was a part of me that thought, Jesus, please don't accidentally be harboring a fugitive right now. But it wasn't the cops she was running from. I sped up a little, pushing things back up to 60 plus so we were moving without breaking any speed limits. And then I was checking my rear view every other second, expecting a pair of headlights to appear. And that's when I remembered my goddamn gas tank and how it was almost empty. As you can imagine, the girl was not excited when I told her that we needed to stop for gas at the next town. She didn't want to believe it at first, that the driver she thought was going to save her had a fuel gauge in the red, and she started freaking out in the passenger seat, screaming the F word over and over until I managed to talk her down. I put my foot down again, picked up some speed, and then told her to call the cops and tell them to meet us at that gas station that we were about to pull to. The girl grabbed my phone from the dash and called 911, and then over the next minute or so, I listened to what she said and got a little more info on what had happened. She didn't go into too much detail, but after telling the cops where we were going, she explained to the dispatcher that she'd been kidnapped, taken someplace out in the woods, then handcuffed to a metal pipe which she'd broken to get free. She said, "I don't know a lot, so I'm assuming in response to questions like who were they or where exactly are you right now." But I also learned that she'd been held for a couple of days by that point, and whoever had been holding her captive had done some disgusting and evil stuff to her. It was no coincidence that when she started detailing some of the stuff she'd endured, I noticed my speed gauge creeping up to 75. It was making my skin want to crawl off my bones just listening to the stuff those creeps did to her. And in my head, I guess I imagined them to look something like monsters. Little did I know, I'd be meeting them sooner than I thought. So we kept on speeding down the highway until we reached the turn that I'd read about, and then after maybe 5 more minutes of rolling through small-town Pennsylvania and sticking to the speed limit, we came to that gas station where we were supposed to meet the cops. But they were nowhere to be seen, and when she realized this, the girl started to freak out again. She started yelling at me, saying, "Where are they? They said they'd be here. Where are they?" And I tried to calm her down by explaining they were probably on their way. But this did nothing to keep her calm. For a few minutes, the girl sat in my passenger seat, watching a car pass here and there and getting super freaked out about who it might be. Then, when a car pulled into the gas station and stopped at a pump, she says, "Oh, screw this. I'm getting out of here." She then jumped out of my car and ran off onto the street behind the gas station and toward what looked like a thick patch of trees. Now, I screamed at her to wait, but she didn't even look back. She just kept on running in her bare feet, with that half a handcuff still dangling from one of her wrists. And then she was gone. My yelling attracted the attention of the guy who just pulled in to pump gas, and for a second, I thought that he might have been the guy the girl was running from. But when I told him everything was under control and the cops were on the way, he nodded quietly and returned to his vehicle. Since the girl was sure that she was being followed, I'd parked my car facing the whole gas station, not near a pump. But since the girl decided to run off and take her chances elsewhere, I figured that I'd do what I went there to do in the first place and actually fill up my tank. And so I got back into my car and drove around to the pumps and was opposite the guy that I'd talked to about calling the cops. Now at this point I'm just kind of reflecting on everything, but we swapped a little small talk about the girl and I explained how I'd picked her up on the highway, scared out of her mind. And he agreed it seemed like something really bad was going on, and then he wished me luck with the cops before he paid for his gas and drove off. But no sooner had he pulled out when another car came rolling into the station. It was a 4-door sedan, a pretty nice one too, and it pulled up to the pump just behind me. 3 men then got out, all real regular-looking guys, probably in their 40s or 50s, and then instead of pumping gas or walking over to the store to buy snacks, they started looking around the area like they were searching for something, or maybe someone. I'm keeping one eye on my gas pump and one eye on the guys that just pulled up, and then suddenly, the oldest of the 3 says, "Hey, you haven't seen a little lady walking around here, would you?" Now, I've always been a really bad liar, and I knew a straight no probably wouldn't pass with this guy, so when the older guy asked me if I'd seen her, I said yes. But then, instead of telling them the whole truth, I told them a version of it. I said that I'd seen a crazy-looking broad in the middle of the highway who'd tried to get me to stop, but since I was pretty sure she was about to try and carjack me, I kept my door locked and drove around her and sped off. I knew not to look him dead in the eyes, so I looked around him and his buddies and then asked, "Why? What's this about? She escaped from like a insane asylum or something?" And the 3 of them just sort of laughed, and I figured that I might have, sold them on my performance. But then as the older guy stayed in front of me, his 2 buddies started flanking me on either side, with one looking at my car and the other looking off in the direction that the girl actually ran. The older guy then suddenly asked me, "Did you call 911?" And again, in what was a version of the truth, I told him I had. I didn't mention anything about arranging to meet the cops at that gas station. I just said that I called them because I was worried some crazy B-word was going to end up splattered on the highway, and some poor schmuck like me was going to end up going to jail over it. I'm not saying it was an Oscar-winning performance, but I tapped into some genuine emotion there. Yet no matter how convincing I thought I was, the guy's 2 friends weren't moved in the slightest, and one of them was now looking through my car windows, clearly looking for any sign of that girl. I think those were some of the scariest, most nerve-wracking moments of my entire life, praying that girl hadn't left anything behind on the passenger seat when she'd bolted, something like a scrunchie or maybe some of her clothing. I also got terrified that I left my phone on the dash and that the guy might see a blood smear or something on that from that girl, and so you can imagine my relief when I felt the weight of it in my pocket. I was at that point I decided to be a little aggressive. And I don't mean that in a sort of I tried to fight them way. It was almost like a normal person would want to know why their car was being inspected, and that's what I asked. I turned to the guy looking into my car, and was kind of rude and standoffish when I said something like, "Hey, what are you looking for, buddy?" And he looked at me, and started backing off away from the car with nothing but a smile. The older guy then said something to the effect of, "Don't mind my friend there, he's just a curious soul." Something really creepy like that, and then they made their excuses and moved on. As I went to pay for my gas, the 3 men were still walking around the gas station. They were doing it less urgently than when they'd first arrived, more subtly too, but they were still looking for that girl. I walked up and down in that store after paying for my gas, making out like I was just an indecisive snacker, and then a few minutes after, the 3 guys got back into that sedan and left. I then made myself some coffee, ate a few protein bars while I told the clerk that whole story, and then walked outside to meet the cops when they showed up maybe 20 minutes after I'd hoped they would. I repeated the story, included the part about the 3 guys showing up, and with added emphasis on how damned unnerving this all had been, like they had the girl fitted with a tracking device or something. And that sounded like a little too sci-fi for me at first, but the more I thought about that afterwards, the more it shifted into the realm of possibility. I know I was on a lonely stretch of highway, and at this point it was almost 11 p.m., but the fact those guys seemed to know exactly where to stop, which car she'd been in, and which direction she'd run off in, it makes me think that that might have just been the case. Even the cop that I spoke to agreed that if it was some kind of kidnapping situation, the girl could have been fitted with some kind of tracking device, most probably in the handcuffs that she was still wearing when she got into my car. And before he left, one of the cops thanked me for calling it in and added that even though it had been a stressful and potentially traumatic situation, getting the police involved was the right thing to do, and meant that we were one step closer to bringing everyone involved to justice. And the guys chasing the girl had potentially made a huge mistake in getting their faces and license plate on the gas station's cameras. And if it was me that had led them there, I should feel proud of myself. It was pretty cool for him to say that, and definitely made me feel a little bit better about this whole thing, but it was also just about the only thing that really did. Because all my other thoughts about it were dark and dark and more dark, and they played out on the rest of the ride home too, which was a whole 3 hours of wondering what the hell had I almost gotten myself into. I got a call from a detective a couple of days later, and after retelling that story to him with as much detail as I could remember, I asked if the girl had been found. And according to him, they hadn't found anybody but the owner of the vehicle the men had traveled in, and that basically they were still trying to figure out what the hell was going on. The detective said if he needed to ask me anything else, he'd give me a call, but that was the last I heard from him, or any Pennsylvanian cop for that matter. And I still think about that girl every now and then. I wonder who she was, who those men chasing her were, and if she ever got far enough away from them that she wouldn't have to live scared anymore. But a part of me thinks that in the same way she wouldn't just give in the same way she'd patiently engineered her own escape, those men chasing her won't give in so easily either, especially when she still has a voice to tell the truth about what happened to her. Some days, when I'm in a brighter mood, I like to think she got away, and that she's raising kids with a good man someplace with all that darkness being just a memory for her. But then other days, when I'm not feeling so swell, I get this bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I feel like I know they got to her, and that they shut her up for good. My name's Nick, and I'm from England. Back in the mid-90s, when our son was still only 4, we went on a family holiday to Tuscany in Italy. My wife had found this incredible villa in a holiday brochure, which was up in the hills above a place called Lucalena. It looked like a little slice of paradise, and it was shockingly cheap compared to some of the less rural villas and apartments. So without delay, we booked it for 2 weeks, paid the fees and deposit, then counted the days into our dream holiday. We landed in Pisa in the late afternoon, and while our young son Tom hated the flight, he loved the ice cream that we bought him before the journey out to Lucalena. It was a good 3-hour drive from Pisa, so by the time we were within maybe half an hour of Lucalena in our village, it was completely dark. We were right out in the countryside too, so the stars above us lit up the sky, and little Tom fell asleep after staring out the window at them. My wife was struggling to stay awake by the time we came to a crossroads, and I was pretty exhausted from the day's traveling myself. So rather than make a gut decision on which path to take, I stopped the car, got my map out, and consulted it before making the appropriate turn. I reassured my wife that we were only a few miles away and that we'd be at the villa within 15 to 20 minutes, and then I drove up a steep path that leveled off at the top. Because of the slope, I couldn't see what was at the top, so I made sure to crest the hill nice and slowly to avoid any kind of collision. But then, as I did, someone jumped out of the bushes at the side of the road and was lit up by my headlights. I could see that he had a long, double-barrel shotgun in his hands, and he was aiming it right at me. I slammed on the brakes as my wife started to panic. Then I was struggling to get the car in reverse when, all of a sudden, I heard, "No, no," from outside the car. A second man had jumped out of the bushes and was lowering the first man's shotgun while telling him no. They both shot us a look of horror, realizing we were not who they thought we were. Then the second man, who stopped the first from shooting, walked over to the driver's side window and tapped on the glass. When I rolled it down, he gave me and my wife this big nervous smile as he said, "Mi dispiace molto, signore," which I knew from my Italian phrase book meant, "I'm very sorry, sir." I didn't really speak much Italian, and what little I'd learned went right out the window when that guy pointed a shotgun at me, so all I could manage in reply was, "Parle inglese?" or "Do you speak English?" And the man said, "No, no," in that melodic, drawn-out Italian way, and then said, "No English, mi dispiace." I then heard my wife ask, "Are you police? Policia?" And the man replied, "Si, policia," with the same big smile on his face, and then told us, "Avanti, vai, vai," which just means, "Come on then, move along." And we both thanked him, and by that point, Tom had woken up in the back seat and was getting very agitated, asking, "Mommy, Daddy, who are these men?" And we told him it was the police, but they had been very friendly and were letting us go. I think my wife believed them at the time, so she was very convincing and reassuring Tom that there was nothing to worry about. But me, I didn't believe a word he'd said about being the police. I didn't say anything with Tom in earshot, and I didn't want to scare him, and arriving at the villa really took the edge off too, because it was even nicer in the flesh than it was in the brochure. But then, once we gotten Tom all tucked into bed and had a few moments to settle down, I told my wife what I'd been thinking. I told her how I didn't think those men were the police. They weren't in uniform, that shotgun looked like it had come off a farm, not from a police arsenal, and they didn't even attempt to show us any badges or identification or anything like that. And she asked me, "Well, if they weren't police, who were they?" And I replied, "The Mafia." My wife just sat down in bed in silence as I made my case, and when I was done, it made sense to her too. A couple of mafiosos had been waiting to ambush someone, and they thought that person was us. The only thing that stopped us freaking out completely was that we were at least a couple of miles away from that ambush site, so the chances of running into them again seemed minimal. She suggested we call the police in the hopes they had an English speaker down at the station, but even if they did, I wasn't sure that was a good idea. The idea of rocking the boat like that made me feel even more nervous than having that shotgun pointed at me and my family, because while that whole thing had apparently been a mistake, having us snitching on the local mafia on our first day in Italy was a deliberate act that might well bring us some undue attention. I'm not saying it was an easy decision to make. I was furious that some idiot had pointed a gun at us, but it quickly became a question of, if we're going to be staying there for 2 weeks, what was the course of action that was going to keep us safest? And that's how we decided to honor that age-old mafia tradition of keeping our bloody mouths shut. The next day, we decided to walk down to Lusalena to do some exploring, and that's how we found this little bar that served paninis, espresso, and assortment of little pastries. I got a coffee, and then while my wife and son got Cokes and played around with the table football set in the little games room they had, I sat at the bar and discovered the bartender actually spoke English. We talked back and forth, and he gave me some restaurant recommendations. Then suddenly, a group of older men who were drinking coffee and playing cards started gesturing toward the bar's television. The bartender turned up the TV, which was showing us a news report of some kind. I asked the bartender what it was about, and after listening to the news lady speak for a minute or so, he turned back to me and said, "There's been a murder, not far from here. His was a businessman who got killed. Terrible thing. I asked him exactly how far away the murder had been, and after consulting with some of the older men, the bartender confirmed my suspicions. It had taken place in almost the exact spot where those armed men had jumped out of the bushes ready to fire at us. I didn't rush to tell the wife. I didn't want to frighten her any more than she already was. But later that day, once we were back at the villa and getting ready to head out for dinner, I told her about the murder. Again, it wasn't like anything we could do about it, or rather, it was nothing we were willing to stick our necks out over by getting involved with local crime. The best thing we could do was try to forget about it, head to Lucelena and enjoy some incredible home-cooked food. It was so good that our young son Tom suddenly didn't mind trying new things when they were all so delicious. And so we ate our fill, and when we were all finished, we asked for the bill. The waiter then comes out with the restaurant's owner, and the pair of them explain in very broken English that the meal had already been paid for. Then when I asked who the generous person was, they explained that it was someone we'd had a misunderstanding with. At first, my wife and I didn't make the connection, and we tried explaining there hadn't been any kind of misunderstanding. We loved the food, and we wanted nothing more than to support their business by paying our bill. But the owner insisted. Our money was no good there. Then when we ate there again the second night, with every intention of leaving a large tip, they once again explained our food was free. But by then, we'd figured out who was paying for our meals. It was the mafia. It didn't happen anywhere else, and we made sure to visit plenty of other places because we felt terrible. I mean, as far as we knew, the mafia hadn't really paid for our food, and those poor people were being forced to cook for free. But then, every time we did eat there, they seemed really happy to see us, and the waiter would always bring our gelato for our 4-year-old son without us asking for it. My wife didn't always approve of all that ice cream, but you better believe Tom did. And that made us think that maybe those mafia guys really were paying the owners for all our food, and that they were running a little scam of their own and giving us as much as possible so they could claim it all back from the mafia. But since we didn't see them ever again, I suppose we'll never know. They never reached out to us, and we didn't see those 2 armed guys around the village at all, but I suppose it was probably a case of they saw us, we just didn't see them. It was an amazing but very intense holiday, but the next time we visited Italy, we went to a completely different part of the country and had no repeat encounters with any nocturnal assassins. We had to pay for all our meals, which my wallet definitely wasn't thanking me for, but we still found that second holiday much more relaxing than the first.
I recently acquired a new roommate. The entire situation should have never happened, but I needed someone to help with the rent. So a Craigslist posting later, he moved in. His name was Greg, and he disclosed to me that he did have some strange sleeping behaviors. Sleep talking, sleepwalking, and night terrors. Funny thing was that I had a history of sleepwalking myself, but only on rare occasions. The first incident occurred about 1 week later when I had heard him screaming in the middle of the night. Since we both sleep in separate rooms on different sides of the house, the screams sounded distant, but enough to scare me so much that I ran to check on him. As I got closer to his bedroom, he stopped screaming, so I just went back to bed. For the next month, he had no issues. I noticed that he had no friends or family that would visit, and I never saw or heard him on the phone or texting. Then another random night, Greg started screaming. The same thing. I got up and started to go to his room, but he'd stop. Then one night I was awoken by screaming in my bedroom. I couldn't see anything in the panic, so I turned on the bedside lamp, and he was at the foot of my bed wearing some sleeping clothes, athletic shorts and a t-shirt. Scared me, so I'd started screaming and woke him up. He apologized and went back to bed. Then the scariest thing happened. About 2 nights later, I awoke to clinking. Sounded like tools and hammers tapping. I turned on the light to see Greg kneeling down in a corner working on something with his hands. A few seconds after turning the light on, Greg froze, then slowly turned his upper body around and stared blankly at me while I laid in bed. I was beyond creeped out, so I slowly slid out of bed and left the house. After sleeping in my truck down the road in an empty church parking lot, I returned to the house at about 8 in the morning. Greg was gone. All of his belongings were gone. No signs of him anywhere. It was like he never lived there. I don't know any of his friends or family, so I had no one to call about him. Days turned to weeks, weeks into months. When I moved out after the lease was up, I was moving my furniture out of my bedroom. In the corner of the room where I last saw Greg kneeling down, I realized the floor vent for the air conditioning was loose. Inside the floor vent was an envelope with a ton of pictures of me sleeping. The pictures had handwritten dates and times written on the back of the pictures. The only other item was a whittled down wooden broom handle brought to a point. I truly believe Greg was preparing to kill me that night, and he realized it. Because it was the sleepwalking Greg that was going to do it, he left to save my life. It appears Greg had been coming to my room almost nightly, and he was working on making the broom handle a stabbing weapon, and I had never heard. Not until the last night I saw him.